Traveling to Consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. As always, I am your host, Clayton. Today's guest is a spiritual TikTok star. You may have seen her on TikTok by the name of, hey, it's Rosh 111. And so I had to reach out and said, hey, what's up, Rosh? Let's get recorded. So she is dedicated to exploring the universe and all aspects within it, pretty much as us in the audience and myself included. She discusses things from your third eye to karmic debt to shifting realities to ego deaths to the illusion of time to free will to parallel universes. And if you thought that was a lot, she talks about so much more. I think we all know how deep the rabbit hole goes. So without further ado, let's talk to her about it. Conscious monkeys, welcome to the show, Rosh Warren. Wow, that was hard to say. Rosh Warren.
No, you're fine.
There it is.
Thank you
The
so
first time I
much.
said it together, and I was like, maybe I should have practiced that.
No, you're fine. That was such a great introduction. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Hell yeah. Well, welcome to the show. Yeah, so the first place, right? Because shifting all these things, right? Shifting timelines, third eye, parallel dimensions. Not too many people grow up with that sort of thing. And I would assume that the first thing you wanted to be, maybe it was a TikTok star, but without putting words in your mouth, what was the first thing that you wanted to be whenever you grew up?
Yeah, so the very first thing I wanted to be was a reader. So I
like a psychic
I just
reader?
loved reading books. No, I loved reading books. And so much so that this was before the age of the internet, right? So I went through all of the books in my family's bookshelf, and then I would start to read encyclopedias.
Whoa.
Yeah, I would read the dictionary, just anything I would read. And it got so bad that my parents actually had to ban me from reading.
Whoa.
Because I wouldn't sleep, I wouldn't eat, I just had this it was a hyper focus on reading. So that's the very first thing that I wanted to be. And then after that it shifted into writing. Yeah, and that's pretty much that stayed an undercurrent in what I wanted to be when I grew up, or when do we really grow up? But
hopefully never.
yeah. But
that's
yeah,
wild.
that stayed an undercurrent.
Before we start the show, I must warn you that there are ads throughout this podcast episode. If you'd like to get the show ad-free, you're able to get access by downloading the official Traveling to Consciousness app. It's available in the Google Play Store and iOS Store. I will note that there is a small monthly fee associated to get these episodes ad-free. And this is an important part. Make sure that any purchases you make on the website, travelingtoconsciousness.com, because products are going to be 15 to 30% more expensive through the app, because, the big boys got to get their own check. Even though you're purchasing this stuff through the website, you will still be able to enjoy all this content on the app. Now, if you prefer the free route, you can get a free login on the app, and that will grant you access to challenges, notifications when new episodes arrive, discounts, exclusive content, and so much more. All of this just by searching Traveling to Consciousness in your phone's app store, or click the link below. Conscious monkeys, I need to tell you about these psychedelic fabric mushrooms that are absolutely incredible that I've just come across. They're all one of a kind and are honestly a perfect trip buddy. They're an incredible addition to anyone's house or room who takes psychedelics and you have a certain spot that you like to go and relax. You're going to have to check out these Aquarius mushrooms. These high-end mushrooms are made with 100% recycled material and are all one of a kind. Honestly, these mushrooms are something I'm not going to be able to describe in words alone. You're going to need to check out the link below and search to see if you can find one that resonates with your soul. Remember, they're all one of a kind and made from 100% recycled material. Aquarius mushrooms, premium mushrooms for the new age of enlightenment. Get yours today. And with that being said, conscious monkeys, let's get back to the interview. I mean, growing up, like, I wasn't the best reader. I didn't enjoy reading. So, like, I could have definitely used some of that if you're looking to give it off to somebody.
Yeah,
But
it stayed with me, honestly. That's like everyone always asks how I know what I know from my TikTok videos, and I tell them it's like tons of reading.
well, I mean, that certainly was going to be a question at some point. So I'm glad you took the initiative to answer it already. But that's super cool because I mean, so let's try to stick in this for a second. So
Yeah.
did you just like, did you see like a future in that, or like was it kind of just like an obsession where you're like, you just got your hands on everything that you could to read?
Yeah, so with writing, I was pushed into the gifted program. Um, and I shouldn't say pushed because like I did like go through the effort to take the tests and like go in there. So I was in the gifted program for writing specifically. And I used to go to summer camps for writing. It's like I loved it so much. So like there was like a summer camp where like college professors would come in and like you would take their courses on writing. So I did that from like 6th grade until end of high school. And then as I was about to like graduate high school senior year, it was like, what do you want to do actually? So I told my parents, like, I think I want to be a writer. Like, it seems like that's where my life has been leading me. And they're just like, no, that doesn't make any money. Like, I'm sorry, but you're going to regret that. And so I ended up going into journalism because at least they said with writing, that's something that could actually make money. But I hated it. It was so different than creative writing. With journalism, there's like a formula that you have to follow, and it has to be sensational. Um, yeah, and it just like totally brought me away from my love of writing.
That's so wild.
Yeah, and so recently I've gotten back into it. I've written like a couple of books over the years, but like not finished them. But recently I've been like on my way to finishing this book. I've been editing it all this year and hopefully I'll be done by next year.
All right, power to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so fascinating, right? Because I mean, and it's so, I guess it's so interesting too, because to me, it's like to hear that there's no money in it. It's like multiple things come up for me because I knew in my childhood, like, I was more of the athlete route and that was kind of my first love. And very quickly it became like, basically nobody makes money doing this. And I find that
Yeah.
so fascinating in your story, how this parallel of, not many people make money. And so therefore you shouldn't do it. When in reality, people have made billions of dollars writing. I mean, look at J.K.
Oh
Rowling,
yeah.
Stephen King,
But it's like
the probability's low, right?
yeah.
But if you're to dive into it, right? And so I just find it really fascinating because I assume you're also a millennial, not to age you,
Yeah.
not to date you.
No,
So
you're
like,
fine. I'm 32. I don't mind.
You never know. So just always play it
Yeah.
safe.
That's fine. Sometimes on TikTok you want to be like appear younger. Being with the in crowd. It's like, no.
That's funny. But so what I was getting at is it seems like maybe like our parents' generation, it was almost more like guided towards that safe route. Like, of course, there's money in writing, but it's like on average, not as many people buy books or not as many people make it to become a professional athlete. So I always find it super fascinating when, and it seems like it's a millennial thing too, at least through these interviews, because it's like majority of people have like this desire and this passion, but then it's like, oh, well, quote unquote, the real world, which I'm sure is a fascinating topic for you as well, kicks in. And it's like, no, it's like, you got to pick something else.
Yeah, I think it's the unlived dreams of parents as well that kind of get put off on you. And like, you know, I had to get a job to support us. And like, I know how hard that is. And so I want to try and do the right thing as a parent to make this easier for you. So, like, just get the job and like get stable. Forget about this dream that like I was never able to realize. So I can't give you the roadmap to like realize yours.
Mm,
Yeah, and I think, like, my mom specifically, she came over from Trinidad, at, like, the age of 16, and she came over by herself.
wow.
Her family only had enough money to send, 1 kid at a time to the US, and so she came over after her sister, met up with her sister, and, like, was just trying to survive, and, yeah, I think that's where it comes from. It's like I don't want you to have to struggle. So I get it, but it is coming back around in like a roundabout way that now I do have to break down who I am and follow my dream because that's like it's obviously something that's ingrained in me from like when I was a young child, you know.
Sure.
And I do think that we all have these gifts, these gifts of genius that need to be explored. And they will be explored one way or another. It can either come out explosively as a midlife crisis, or you can do it, when you're younger.
So this is crazy because you said gifts of genius, and that is something that I actually thought about today.
Oh,
Because in my last interview, we were talking about genius and being crazy, and
mhm.
and so today I just interviewed her yesterday, the person who I'm going to be airing before you. But the point is that I was thinking about it today, and you said gifts of genius, and I was like thinking like, I truly believe that because genius is such a weird thing, right? There's different ways to be a genius. You could be a genius of writing, you could be a genius of rocket science, you could be a genius in art.
Yeah.
And yet society seems to create this mold of what a genius is, right? Like majority of people, when they hear genius, they might think of Einstein or Newton, but
Yeah.
that's a genius in the realm of science. And they, were
Mhm.
probably great at it. They probably figured it out. They probably loved it. They probably had everything working in their favor that made them the genius at that. So when you said gifts of genius, like it reminded me of something I thought of today was that I truly believe that there is genius in everybody, and I'm interested to hear
Oh,
what you think of
yes.
this, is that there's this spark of genius, like we're all geniuses. The only problem is we're being placed in an environment that doesn't cultivate that genius out of us.
Yeah. So, yes, I do think that everyone is born with an inner genius. And it's very interesting because the Greek word for genius was actually demon, spelled Daemon. And so the Greek word for happiness is actually eudaimonia. And so the U uh, is literally it's meaning to make your genius happy, to make the demon inside happy. And so basically the thought is that if we cultivate this inner genius, which cultures know that we are born with this inner genius. There was a to go off on another tangent. There's an old Native American story of this boy named Poder, and he ends up going through this journey to find his genius that he was born with, and it basically teaches the culture that you're all born with this inner genius. Um, but if you don't cultivate that, then it can turn into your inner demon and come out in
Oh,
explosive ways. Yeah. So to go back to the Greek. Yeah. So
that's
this
so
is something
crazy.
that originally we all knew. We all knew that we had this inner genius. But as we've moved towards a modern culture, it's like this special thing that like you can't have, but they can have it. And it's like, no, that's not what it originally was.
That's so fascinating, right? So
Yeah.
like to even summarize what you're saying is if you're taking that genius and let me think about this. We have the genius, we're born
Yeah.
with the genius, but if you're in an environment that isn't cultivating it or isn't allowing it to thrive or to manifest into the world, then you will then manifest essentially the demon aspect of it, or the hate filled, or anxiety, or sadness, or depression, because now you're living in a environment, let's say society, let's say your parents growing up, whatever it is, who have defined what it means to succeed, and it's not in alignment with what that genius is. So then it cultivates a demon. You become angry, you become mad, you become tyrannical or cynical about the world and its nature.
Yeah, you lose meaning in the world. That's when nihilism comes out. And I do think there's an epidemic of nihilism in culture right now.
Oh, for sure.
And it reminds me of the movie. I haven't seen this movie in such a long time, so you can correct me if I'm wrong on the details if you've seen it. But The Golden Compass, where everyone has their own demon.
I haven't seen it.
And the demon is it's I think it's a great movie. So basically, and then they also did a show on it on HBO called His Dark Materials. So basically, like, everyone has their own demon, and their demon is an animal. It's like an animal spirit. But the demon is also their gift. And so I guess that's what I think C.S. Lewis wrote that book, but I think that's what he was hinting at, is that inner genius.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so you're bringing the books back up again, which I'm assuming this is how
I know.
All this. No, I love it. I want to cultivate it. I'll try it. This is an environment to like explore that, to thrive in. So then let's even stay back there. Let's go back to whenever you were reading all this time. What kind of genres were you first interested in? And because I'm assuming there's a way that you kind of made this journey towards spirituality. What were the first like types of books that you started reading then?
So it was really whatever I could get my hands on, I was reading. So like I said, I like went through the whole bookshelf. There was like fiction, nonfiction, whatever, and then encyclopedias, even magazines. I was just reading whatever I could, and then it kind of became like an escapism. Because I was bullied really badly in school. I think I mentioned to you before that I'm neurodivergent, and so now I'm really outspoken about the fact that I do have ADHD. I am on the autism spectrum, and so my mind just works differently. And so books to me around that age of like middle and high school became something that I could escape into. So it was more like fiction, like Harry Potter's, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that, where you could be the hero of the story. And I didn't really get into spiritualistic reading until I would say like 22. That's when I really started getting into it, because I had this like, I basically had the death, that happens when someone goes through initiation of life. And I needed to. So that's when I got really into the spiritualist books.
Conscious Monkeys, I need to bring your attention to this company that I've been using over the past few months, and probably longer now if you're hearing this, that has absolutely changed the way that I'm actually interfacing with the world. It's a company by the name of Conscious Technologies. And what they do is actually create these harmonizing units. And what it does is it actually takes the rotation of EMF frequencies that are in your area and harmonizes them. They make them in line with the true natural frequency of the universe around you. And they're incredible products. I actually went and I've tested out their quantum flow unit. I've tested out their meditation bed, their core harmonizer. And quite frankly, they were so incredible that I actually bought the cell phone EMF harmonizer for my cell phone. I was also lucky enough that Ross threw in a necklace as well. So I've been wearing that thing, and quite frankly, I'm even wearing it to bed, and my dreams have become so vivid and just intense that it's pretty insane. I honestly feel so grateful to have it. Their mission is to bring forth technologies that support the harmony of mankind and the world at large. Go check out their stuff. I mean, looking's for free. And if I'm being honest, if you click the link below and make a purchase, I do get some kickback, but quite frankly, I wouldn't be promoting it if it didn't work. So with that being said, go check them out. Conscious Technologies LLC, link below. Conscious monkeys, are you looking for a CBD cream that actually works? I've tried many different CBD products and I've really never truly felt like any of them have worked for me. Like maybe there'd be like a little bit of tingling and then it would fade pretty quickly. Then came along Revive CBD. From the first time I tried it on, I could tell that there was something different about this product. I noticed that any joint pain I had was gone within minutes of applying it, and it lasted for a significant duration. I don't have an exact time for you guys, but do your own test. So, if you're still looking for the right CBD cream, then this might be the right one for you because if you resonate with my vibe, then maybe you'll resonate with this vibe. I actually kind of just made that up on the spot, so hopefully you liked it. Check out the link below. And as a side note, like always, the link below is an affiliate link. But again, I would not be promoting them if it didn't work for me. So hopefully it'll work for you. Again, check it out below, myrevibe.com. Get yours today. And with that being said, conscious monkeys, let's get back to the interview. That's so interesting. So the first thing that's popping up here is number one, I'm not 100% sure what I have an idea, but in your words, what does it mean to be neurodivergent?
Yeah. So to me, neurodivergence is just a difference in thinking.
Okay.
So it encompasses different, I don't know how they classify them now because before it was like disorders, but now I think that they're like getting away from that word because they realize it's not a disorder, it's just a difference of thinking. But yeah, the things like ADHD or autism are classified under that. So it's a
Okay.
blanket.
Because it's interesting because neurodivergent, like, wouldn't technically everybody be neurodivergent? Like, we all have different ways of
Yeah.
thinking.
And some, but I think it's a little different because society has molded itself, I think, around a certain type of thinking. And there are some people who can adapt more than that to that than others. Yeah, so I think that's where the big distinction comes from. Like for me personally, I would never be able to like work a full 8 hours a day, which I don't think anyone should do. But there are some people who can like do it if they have to, you know.
If I'm super focused on something, I can do it. And if like I'm passionate about it, but majority of the time it's like, nah, it's like
Yeah.
even doing this, like editing stuff or creating certain content, like it's like I'll do it in blocks. Like I'll do it for an hour or two and then I got to go work out and then I'll do an hour or two, then I'll
Yeah.
go eat. Like it's just 8 hours doing one thing is difficult. I think
It's
that that's really difficult. And I mean, even bringing us back to ADHD, right, is like a part
yeah.
of me thinks that there has to be some sort of container that it's like, okay, well, like everybody can, quote unquote, everybody can focus for 8 hours. But if you're not able to focus for 8 hours, then we classify you as ADHD. And I don't, and by the way, I'm by no means do I know any of the medical definitions of this.
Yeah.
So it's, I say this as heartfelt as I can to you because I really can't personally don't know the medical terminology for it, but where it gets interesting, and I'm kind of dragging here a little bit, where it gets
No, you're
interesting
fine.
is if it comes to reading, right? Are you, like you're able to just sit down and read for, I
Yeah.
assume, long
So
periods
the
of time.
autism comes in. Yeah.
That's
That's
where it
the special
switches.
interest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Well, you think of people that have genius where modern society thinks of it, people who can do crazy calculations in their heads. That's originally what people think of as autism. Like, oh, okay, like they're a savant or like, but there are so many different it's a spectrum. So there's so many different ways that it appears. But a lot of people do have a special interest that they can do for a very long time.
well, but so then this makes it interesting for me, right? And whenever
Yeah.
I say these things, I also want you to know that this is me kind of trying to understand and almost challenging the societal words or classifications that we're using to categorize people, right? So
Yeah.
based on how that was kind of broken down, right, is you're saying that you have ADHD unless you're
Mhm.
reading, and once you're reading, then it becomes autistic. But wouldn't
Mhm.
that just be, okay, you're super passionate about reading and you just love to read?
Yeah. So autism, hmm. Because I also, whenever you find out that you have one of these things, you go through like a couple different stages. So
Okay.
one of the stages is like denial that you have it, or like I don't want to label myself
Mm.
because I don't have this. But it does present itself in other ways, and where I know that it's coming out, and that is what it is. And I guess hmm. And it's interesting in what you're saying, because when I look at my astrology chart, my natal chart, I can actually see different planets that indicate that I would have some of these struggles. So, like, certain planets are like, oh yeah, you would definitely have ADHD. You would definitely have these autistic traits. And it's like, oh, did I like come into the universe because I wanted to learn lessons associated with having these things? Um, but yeah, I get what you're saying. In that, how do I know that it's autism when I'm like sitting down to read? Is that
I mean, I
what
guess
you're saying there?
so. Again, I am not very well adversed. There was a kid across the street growing up who had autism. He was younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I know it manifests in different ways, and I'm not very
Mm-hmm.
acute to knowing what like the medical definition is, or quite frankly,
Yeah.
how serious it is. I really don't. I'm sure
Mm.
it's a spectrum and a scale, but just based on the way that your story's playing out, the way that I view the
Mm-hmm.
world would just be like, yeah, you're not interested in things other than reading. So if it's not
Yeah.
reading, you're not going to focus on it. The
Mm-hmm.
society classifies that as ADHD, but in reality, you're just not passionate about it. But then when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to reading, it's like, oh, like this is where my passion lies. So
Yeah.
you become hyper focused on it. And like, I feel like that's normal. Like when I'm super passionate about creating a video, like I'll just jump into it and do it for 4 or 5 hours, and time flies by.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never actually, it's funny. I've actually said that maybe I've been autistic a little, but I've said it kind of as a joke. but
Yeah,
I,
yeah, tons of people say that. Yeah.
but I
I
don't, I don't really know. So I get that's just the
Yeah.
way that I view the world. And so that's why I'm kind of presenting it in that light to you.
Yeah, I think I should have done a better job explaining. So my autism extends like beyond my special interests. So like, um, when I'm in a conversation with someone, it would be harder for me to like. I would have to actually think, okay, you need to like look into their eyes, like, or like you need to do it every now and then, because if you look away the whole time, they're going to think that you're weird. And as I was growing up, there are certain things where like, um, people always say to me, oh, you have such a nice smile. You like, I love when you smile when you talk. But that's actually something that I trained myself to do, because people were saying, like, oh, you look like stoic all the time. You look unapproachable. And so I was just like, oh, so humans, they like smile or like they do this thing when they want to seem approachable. So that's what I have to do. And it's called masking, but like you basically do all these things socially so that you can adapt. Um, so much so that like, even emotions or like sarcasm, I don't get sarcasm. So that was like a big thing
Mm.
growing up. Um, and I have like a overabundance of, or I guess I should say that I'm very sensitive to energies or things around me. And so like lights, for example, there's almost never lights on in our house because I can't deal with artificial light. It literally hurts me. It like hurts my body, which is like
Interesting.
hard to explain to people. But yeah, autism is like very much more woven in. Yeah.
So this is interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
as you're talking there, I feel like I'm maybe I might be on the spectrum then as well, because
Yeah.
I know that there have been times where I have, what was it? like whenever, like when I would try to be sarcastic, it would come across as mean because people wouldn't know that I was
Yeah.
joking. So I kind of had to like teach myself to laugh after the fact. I do know that
Yes.
there have been books I have read on things like, you know, eye contact, how to kind of create speech, let's say, or, you know, connect with people. Honestly, like I started reading books to
Yeah.
figure that out. A huge catalyst came whenever I did some plant medicine to kind of like unlock some traumas in my past, which is, you know, another story. But I find that interesting because I just feel like it's, I don't know, I guess if you're not aware of society, like I don't know, because to me it's like that's something
Yeah.
that just comes easy to some people, and some people just need to learn how to do it, or maybe it's just like the way it comes in. So I don't know. I mean, either
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
It's interesting. Dolores Cannon actually has a talk on this where she talks about people with ADHD and people with autism are actually the new wave coming in.
Mm,
And so this newer way of thinking with ADHD, that faster pace of thinking, or with autism, the focused in, the zeroed in way of thinking is something that's needed on this earth. Um, and it's like people want to, I think originally with autism, especially with organizations like Autism Speaks, um, people wanted to kind of eliminate that. They thought it was a disorder. And so they wanted to change that way of thinking to
mm.
fit more into modern society. Um, but what Dolores said was that no, we need to adapt to that way of thinking because it's the new wave coming in. So, yeah, I do agree that it's not something that should be looked at as like, I have this thing wrong with me. And that's not how I look at it anymore. There are points in my life where I did look at it like that, but I think it's more so like I just think differently, and me thinking differently can be helpful. And there are others like me because when I was growing up, the only people that had autism were like white males, and they actually didn't even extend the diagnosis to people of color or
Really?
women because, yeah, because they didn't think that we could have it. So,
What?
you know, it's, yeah,
That's crazy. And
yeah.
okay, so this parallels something else that I've been thinking about a lot recently. You brought up Dolores Cannon, so I assume you've read some of
Yep.
like the Life Between Lives books. You've read like Michael
Oh,
Newton
yeah, that
type
is
books.
what
Okay.
I talk about a lot on my channel.
Okay. I might have missed those videos, but all right, cool.
No, you're
Um,
fine.
so to like get the viewers up to speed with where I'm going with this, the core concept is that, you know, our soul is this infinite thing that travels and has multiple lives. Honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, it's highly likely that this is not your first life, because if you're attracted to all these ideas, you've likely lived multiple lives before this. So where this gets interesting, right, is a part of this is where you choose your life, you choose your incarnation, you choose certain life events that you're going to have throughout your life to experience life lessons. Now, okay, so, and this might get a little political, but let's try to keep it away from politics. But where it
Yeah.
gets interesting is like I've looked at the landscape of how it's almost like there's like so different social revolutions, right? Of course from slavery, but I was even looking at it from the lens of like gay and lesbian, and then, you know, just in like
Mhm.
2010, like it was legalized, that gay marriage was legalized. um and so it seems like, you know, the next wave that's kind of coming is the idea of transgender. And where this got really fascinating for me was this idea of, you know, if we picked our body, if we picked the lives that we were coming into, then how could it be that people believe that they have found themselves in the wrong body or the other gender?
Mm.
And so for me, I feel like that's such a fascinating concept of like, well, if they pick this body, but then did they pick this body in order to argue that they were in the wrong body? Or is this kind of like something that they're trying to trigger in our subconscious to just be more accepting of more things? Like,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I'm
What does
interested if
that
you've
mean?
ever,
Yeah.
yeah, if you've ever thought about that.
I actually got a question on that on one of my videos. Tons of questions actually. And so for me, what I think is that the soul wanted to learn how to move through this. It wanted to learn how to move through that adversity. But bigger than the soul, I think that universally, the lesson that we're supposed to learn as a society is that we do have this duality, this duality of genders, or masculine and feminine within us, and that we can, like, it is a very fluid thing. Um, yeah, I think that it is supposed to be a lesson in there, though, um, both for the individual soul and for the universal consciousness as well, to understand these concepts.
It's interesting. I mean, there's always a lesson, right?
Yeah, true. But yeah, I specifically, I have people who are transgender that comment on my content and ask, like, well, if I can choose any life, why did I choose this one? And that goes back into when people ask, you know, why would people choose a life of poverty? Why would people choose to be born gay in like a landscape that doesn't accept that? Why would you choose that? And Alan Watts actually has a really great lecture on this, where he talks about the universe kind of being cold in a sense, with the lessons. And us as humans, we don't understand that because we do have empathy. And we do come up from a space of like, oh my God, why would the universe let that happen to that person? But the universe is more so coming from a space of like, this needed to happen for growth, for expansion. It doesn't matter what happened. What matters is the growth that comes after it.
Conscious Monkeys, if you're looking to start your own podcast, I have the 2 tools that you need to use to get that show on the road. And the names are Buzzsprout and Riverside. I'm combining these into one ad because, you know, I've honestly had nothing but the best for them. But if you're going to be using one of them, you might be using the other one. So what Buzzsprout is essentially the platform that I use to put my podcast out there. It's the reason you can hear this. That's the reason that I appear on all these different directories. The thing you might also need is that if you're interviewing people, you're going to need Riverside as well. And quite frankly, I'm using it right now to even just record these podcasts because they will even dilate in. Dilate in? I don't think that's the right phrase for it. They will harmonize your voice so that it sounds equivalent. So if I start talking quiet at one point, they have a built-in editor that will actually make your voice sound crisp. I highly suggest Buzzsprout and Riverside. Go check out the links below in the description. And like always, these are affiliate links, so I do get a minor kickback if you do sign up with them. However, like always, they are incredible. The support has been on point and they always get back to me, so I highly recommend them. If you have any questions, they're there to help. Conscious Monkeys. I've got something out there for all my coaches. Anybody who has digital courses, anybody who's creating content, whether it's audio or video, you got to check out SuperPass. SuperPass is this super dope platform that I've been using now, and they're actually what has enabled my app to work. It's what's enabled me to start generating income and to help people more effectively. If you are a content creator, you create audio, video, whatever it may be, SuperPass might be the choice for you because they'll provide you with your own app and they have a great online service to also help you out. So I'm not going to put in too much because everything they do is way too much to pack into this one ad. I will say go click the link below because that is where you'll be able to find all the information. This is an affiliate link and I wouldn't be promoting them if it didn't help me. Click the link below and go check out SuperPass. With that being said, Conscious Monkeys, let's get back to the last segment of the interview. Yeah, I know there's a Chinese proverb. I actually just released this video on my Instagram, but there's like a Chinese proverb where, you know, it's about this farmer. Maybe you've heard it where he's like, you know, basically the illusion of good and bad. You know, it kind of goes along the lines of like, you know, he has a horse or he gets a horse. It comes to his farm. The town thinks it's so great. They come to his house. They're like, this is so good. This is so great. And he's like, maybe it's great. Well, one day then his kid starts riding the horse. The kid breaks his leg and the entire town comes and they're like, this is so terrible. This is so bad. You know, who's going to help you with the farm? The farmer's like, well, you know, maybe it's bad. Then like a week later, China goes to war. And so the military or the government's looking for all able-bodied military-age men to fight for the war. They come to the farmer's house. They see that his kid has a broken leg. They're like, okay, we can't take him to war with a broken leg. So then the
Yeah.
entire town comes. They're like, oh, this is so great. This is so great. And the farmer's like, maybe it's great. And so it's really a great allusion to what you're saying. It's like, why do we have to go through these tough times in order to, actually transcend, or actually like what is there? And it's almost like that lesson, or like learning the lesson is the catalyst in order to get us to that next stage or element in our evolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's I think this story is told across a lot of different cultures, but basically the story of creation. Um, so this woman comes down, she creates Earth, and from her are born two twins, two sons, and it's like some cultures call it the good mind and the bad mind. And so basically the good mind, the good son, he was like born the normal way, it was a good birth. And then when the other son came out, the bad one, he like kicked open her stomach and basically killed her. But not really, because she like became Mother Earth. So then these two sons were like living on Earth, and everything that the good son created, the bad son would destroy or create its antithesis, create its opposite form, its more like dark form. Um, so they kind of like split off into different sectors of the earth. The good son had this side, the bad son had the other side. And one day this bird came up to the good son and was just like, hey, like, I need water. And the bad side is the side that has water. So I'm going to go over there and get some water. So went over there, found out that like there was a frog that had like swallowed up all of the water, even on the bad side. So the good son had to go over and basically like kill the frog to release the water. And so he had to go over into the darkness to birth creation, to birth something. And it's like that coming together of the dark and the light. You can't have the light without the dark. You have to have both of them. Yeah, so
That's a beautiful story.
yeah, I really like that one. It's across so many different cultures too, which is the crazy thing.
So, as a quick step back, how many books do you think you've read in your entire
Oh my
life?
goodness. I don't know. I mean it's hundreds, but I wouldn't be able to give you like a
That's wild.
number.
Do you feel like you remember all of them pretty well?
Um, hmm. I don't know. There are certain moments in my life where like things come up and I'm like, "Oh my god, I have a story for that." Or like I like remember this from the story. But like on an everyday basis, no. But
Well, that'd
somewhere
be
in the
overwhelming.
unconscious,
Yeah.
yeah, but like somewhere in the unconscious, it's there and I can like pull it out when needed. But yeah, not regularly.
It's not just like on hand.
It's just, yeah, that's like Akashic records are like in my head
You're trying to create
at
the
all
moan.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. So then have you read, I guess, some of the, like the sacred texts, like along the lines of like just like the whole Bible, or, any of the
Ah,
other type of texts?
yeah. So I was actually really religious when I was younger. And I did read the Bible front to back. I actually couldn't tell you though the entirety of it. It's just like very specific passages still stick out to me where I can call back to them.
Mm.
Um but yeah, I've definitely read that one. I have the Kabbalah. I have the um Bhagavad Gita. I have not read them though. I've read like half of the Kabbalah. Um, but yeah, that is something that I want to do.
It's pretty cool. I was gonna say, because that seems like it would be like right up your alley with like meshing the spirituality with, you know,
Yeah.
these texts that have been around for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah. One that I have read is the Hermetic Principles, but
You know, I keep hearing people talk about those, but I haven't gotten around to it.
Mhm. Yeah, I really suggest it, especially if you're interested in things that Neville Goddard talks about.
Mm,
It meshes beautifully um, with that, and it only enhances your understanding of what he's
okay.
talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those are some. Because Neville Goddard was essentially like the law of assumption as opposed to like
Yep.
attraction,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
blew my mind whenever I first heard about it. It's like if you're doing the law of attraction, like you're always in this perpetual state of just attracting, and it's like, yeah, I
Yeah.
never really thought of it that way. Like that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's always like I need more of this. I don't have. It's like coming from a lack space.
Right. All right.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what are some of your favorite? How about this? What's your favorite book of all time?
Ah. Oh my goodness. Um. Hmm. I would say I have two. So the first one would have to be Dolores Cannon, um, Custodians.
Mm.
It's a good one. Um, and then the second one would have to be John Kabat-Zinn, Wherever You Go, There You Are. Oh man, can I say three?
You can do whatever you want. No
And
rules.
then Letters to a Young Poet would be my third.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I've kind of glimpsed over Custodians, or I've like heard a little bit about it, and it's on my wish list on Audible. So that's one that I'm
Oh,
gonna
okay,
get to
good.
soon.
It's a crazy one.
Does she do past life regression
It's
to figure out that as well?
Yeah, so I was actually trained in the same well, I was trained under her in, the QHHT, past life regression.
Oh, cool.
So she does that to uncover these answers, and, like, because I do that type of past life regression, I know that these things are real. Like, um, there are certain things that people say. For example, my boyfriend is not spiritual at all. Um, he really doesn't I would say he's, like, pretty atheist. He doesn't believe in much around spirituality, but he likes to help me out, and so he did a past life regression, with me, and when we were under and I was talking to the source, the, universal consciousness, I was asking him these questions, and, he gave me answers that he would never give. Like, I was asking him, about, like, money and, what he was thinking about moving jobs, and so, I was asking the universal consciousness, like, how he can feel secure in moving his job, and he was just like, "The money will come. Don't worry about the money." I was just like, "That is not you."
Who am I talking to?
And, like yeah, and, so it's funny because the universal consciousness says certain phrases, and it says that all of the time, and that's one of the things that it says is the money will come. And you hear this in Dolores Cannon's, past life regressions as well, and my boyfriend did not know that phrase, but he said it, and I was just like, "Oh, that's it." Like
That's so
yeah,
wild.
it's pretty crazy.
What's also crazy is that I had no idea that you did QHHT. Is that how you spell it? QHHT.
QHHT, yeah.
QHHT. Yeah, and I've actually
Yep.
been thinking about doing it, so I might have to hit you up after this to
Yeah.
schedule something.
Yeah, definitely.
So
It
what?
is a crazy experience.
I've I've read books, uh,
Yeah.
but so with that, like, do you set an intention, like? And so for those who don't know, the core concept is to go into one of your past lives, or even to go into your life between lives and figure out stuff.
Mhm.
So how does it work to like set an intention with something like that?
Yeah, so in the beginning of the session, we just basically talk about why they're coming in. people have all different reasons why they're coming in. So it might be they're trying to figure out something from their past life, if something from a past life is carrying over into this life, and causing them problems. Another thing that people try and figure out is if they made like an oath or what do you call it? Basically this like promise in a past life that binds your soul to um a certain lesson, and then they try and figure out if they can overcome that. So there's a bunch of different intentions of why people would do it. Some people are just interested.
But then do you see it? I guess, is it possible to set to like go into a past life? Like, hey, I know that this past
Oh, a
life
specific
exists,
one.
or yeah, like that, or even just, um, to visit like the time, I guess, yeah, visit a past life or visit like the time before incarnating on this earth where, you're going through your life review, you're meeting with your
Mhm.
masters. Are you able to kind of just do all of that?
Yeah, so I, in every session, no matter what, go into the afterlife, where they can meet their spirit guides, the masters, and like see what that's all about. And then as far as going into a specified past life, how I've done it is if someone goes into a past life in a previous session and then they want to go back into it, then we can do that. But I've never had someone come to me with a past life that they want and then go into that, because I think the universe shows us what we need to be shown. And so we can ask for that, but I don't know. I like to be more free flowing
Mm,
with it, unless we're specifically working on a past life over like a couple sessions.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've meditated and got to a place where I was started to experience a past life, and I know like bits and pieces of it. I did an Akashic record reading where they gave me a
That's
couple
cool.
more pieces,
Oh,
and then
nice.
yeah, so I'm thinking like, maybe there's more in there that needs to be unfolded, but I don't know. I mean, that's maybe
Yeah.
getting personal, and we can figure that out after the fact.
No, I like that.
It's super cool.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that for?
Yeah, there's so much. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I was just curious how long you've been doing QHHT sessions for.
Since just last year, actually, is when I got my certification for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. That's so
Yeah.
cool. I mean,
So
and then
I love it.
do people usually like already believe before they kind of come to you, or is it like 50-50? I don't know
Mhm.
what to expect, or
Yeah, it's really interesting. Um I would say I get more people that are in the 50-50, but it's so interesting because I screen everyone basically to make sure that they can handle a session,
mm,
because I think if you have um for example, if you have very, very high anxiety, a past life regression will not be for you, because there are some intense situations that you can find yourself in
right.
within a past life, and you do not want to be in a situation where you're experiencing that and you're not able to handle it, and then it creates a PTSD or something like that. So I do deep trance before that. I'm also deep trance hypnotherapist, so I'll do that to like get the anxiety down, then go into the past life regression. Um, but anyway, so I talked to these people before, and most people are like, "Oh yeah, I believe in this. I've read the books. Like, I'm great." But then we get into the session, and they're like, "Actually, I don't know if this is like gonna be in my from my imagination, or like if this is really happening." Um, and I think that that's like a theme that's prevalent throughout, and I have to explain that like I think people expect me to say, no, of course this isn't in your imagination, like this is real. um but no, imagination is the most powerful thing that we have as humans, and this is most definitely in your imagination. And in order to utilize it to the fullest, you have to realize that it's coming from your imagination and fully trust that and go with it.
That's probably one of the craziest things that's so wild, because there's so much truth with that. Because,
Yeah.
I started looking into, what is it? Is clairvoyance? Is clairvoyance when you see things?
Yeah, that's what I have.
So,
Well, yeah. So I think I told you this before. I'm also a psychic medium.
okay.
Um, and yeah, I use clairvoyancy for that.
Well, so what's wild about that? So I'm predominantly clairaudient, but then I started
Oh,
realizing
cool.
that I started reading things, and people are like, "Yeah, if you have dreams, or you can imagine, or like you can see in pictures, then you're clairvoyant as well." And I'm like, what? Like,
Mhm.
not everybody can do that. And so it's so wild to me that, even things that I just took for granted, it's like, this is actually like a psychic power. And
Yes.
where it got even crazier is, there was some guy who I did an Akashic record reading for, and he then at the end of it was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, like I do this thing for free where I teach people how to like get into the astral realm." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, it takes like 30 minutes and then you have access to it all the time." And I'm like, "Seriously?" And he's like, "Yeah." And
Cool.
so, yeah, which was crazy. And so we did it. And I had that same exact like thing. Like we went through the whole process, and I got there, and he's like, "Look at your body." And I'm like, "I don't have a body." I was like, "This is a whole, like, it's just like an energy stream." And then he's like, "Look at the
Yeah.
water we talked about." And I was like, "I see it, but it's not exactly water. It's just energy." And he's like, "Yeah, like this is the astral realm." And then
Nice.
I had the same thought you did though, where, or your clients do, or like, am I just imagining this, or is it real?
Uh-huh.
And then and then I think he said something like right as I thought that, like, just so you know, like this is like real. This isn't just your imagination. Like this is like
Mhm.
what your imagination does, or like this is your transportation
Uh-huh.
into it. And I was like,
Yep.
shit, man, like this is so crazy. And
Yeah.
and so now whenever I've been
Mhm.
meditating, I've actually been like going into the astral realm and doing different types of like work and like energy
Good.
stuff. And it's just so crazy how it's like it's so close and so usable, but yet we're just told that it's not real or not possible.
It's mhm. And it has this negative connotation to it. And I think it goes back to the genius that we were talking about. We also have this um, notion that psychic abilities are something rare, something that only a small subset of people can have. Um, but what I found is that every person has a psychic ability that is more prominent. So, like for me, it's clairvoyance that's more prominent. But you can most definitely teach yourself the other abilities, and you can practice them.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
and yeah, and I think yeah, it's I try and teach people that you have all of this stuff within you, you know. It's just you weren't taught that in schools.
Well, I mean, and and I brought this up, the again, the interview before years, she was like a dream oracle, and we talked about dreams, and the idea that we're like, when you're a kid and you have a nightmare, your parents tell you that it's not real. And so
Mhm.
you grow up thinking like, "Oh, okay, like I'm going into this place that isn't real." But then it's
Yeah.
like, who's not to say that this is just as real as the reality that we're experiencing right now? And obviously
Mhm.
there's different, things along those lines, but the core concept of it, right, is that this is real. And the
Yeah.
idea of like being clairaudient, even, and that's what drove me insane. I realized that like a huge part of my overthinking actually came from the fact that I'm clairaudient. it,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I realize that now, because like I'll have dialogues with myself now where I can very instantly be like, okay, should I do this? And then a different voice comes in, is like, yes. I'm like, okay. And I
Yeah.
and I know it's this voice that's separated from my ego, because sometimes it tells me to do
Uh-huh.
shit and I'm like, I don't want to do that. And it's like, well, you asked what you're for your highest self, so here's what to do.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and I'm realizing now that back, like whenever I was younger, I would get into these like, mental altercations, like if I do this, then that, then this, then that, but what about this, or what about that? And it manifests as people saying, "Oh, you're just overthinking it." But in reality, I was kind of just having a conversation between my ego and my higher self, trying to figure out like the right path to take.
Yeah. Um It is interesting how you're talking about when you're younger, you didn't know what it was, because that's the same thing for me with clairvoyance. Um, I remember the very first spirit that I saw was my grandma. And it was so creepy. It was like I was going into my kitchen and like all the lights were turned off. I was just like, it was late at night. I was getting a glass of water. And so I was like walking upstairs. And before I walked upstairs, there's a hallway to my left. And I look down the hallway. I see my mom like sitting on the couch and she's drinking coffee, but she looks old and like, she's like, what the? So I'm like calling out for her and I'm walking towards her. Um, and right before I get to her, my mom comes down the stairs and she's like, "What? Why are you calling me?" And I was just like, "What? I just saw you sitting there." Um, and yeah, it's interesting because like no one is equipped to help you. Or I guess no one in my family was equipped to help me. And that seems to be prevalent with a lot of people that have that when they're younger. These psychic abilities appear. And so for me, I literally thought I was going crazy. So I shut it down. I was just like, I don't want to see these things. And I didn't get it back until like my mid 20s is when it came back, when I was ready for it. But yeah, it is unfortunate that a lot of these gifts get shut down because of fear or people don't know how to work with it. I'm actually going to plug in my laptop really quick. It like got
Okay.
unplugged somehow.
No, that's cool. I'll plug it
Okay.
in. Yeah. I find it super interesting while you're doing that. I find it super interesting too, because that seems to be also a common theme that I've seen throughout some other people too, like that I've had on the podcast, where the one girl I'm thinking of is Akashic Danny West, who was also very clairvoyant. And, you know, she had to start setting boundaries, and she had this event when she was a little kid, episode 29, if anyone's listening and interested, where she saw someone like actually kill themselves and was like, yo, like, what the fuck? Like, this is a boundary. She's like, I don't want to see this shit. And so she actually shut it down for the longest time, because just like you said, she had no one in her life who was like, oh yeah, like this is clairvoyance. Like, yeah, this happens. You know, instead it gets pushed under the rug of like, you're crazy. Not, I mean, I guess some people would say you're crazy, but for her, it was just kind of like, this isn't real. I don't know what you're talking about. And then it got shut down for the longest time until an event occurred, I think in her probably mid 20s as well, where it was like, hey, like revisit this. And so I don't know. I wonder if that's something that's kind of going into the same line of, you know, like this ADHD and this autism thing, where it's just like this new wave of appreciation that the millennial generation is just starting to uncover or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, for me, navigating with the neurodivergence, it is something where I had to incorporate it into my spiritual beliefs, and say, like, yeah, this is a medical diagnosis, but I also understand that my soul is this way for a reason. Um, and I believe that it is like this new wave of thinking. This thing that connects us more to our creative abilities to source what we're capable of. And yeah, I do think that plays a role as well, but it's also like intertwining that with the modern society and saying like, yeah, I know that this is not something that's wrong with me, but in the same instance, I know that there are certain things that I need to have in order to like survive, you know, in this world. Just like, you know, like we are living in the 3D, we are living in this modern type of society. And there are some things that you need to concede to and say, like, okay, this is like disabling me in this way. And so I need to do this to counteract it.
100%. And to even expand on that, I believe that there's this element of like, even in that story, right? Or even in our stories, there's a level of like safety and love that we need to garner from the people around us. If we let our ego take over, we need to find it from society, even because sometimes we're not able to find it within ourselves until much later. And so to your point, you know, you need to have that baseline of, you know, safety and love almost until you're able to actually like almost blossom into seeing all these gifts and this beauty that you have. So it's almost like
Mhm.
planting a seed, and, you know, it needs some water, it needs some, you know, sunlight
Yeah.
in order for it to actually like be like, okay, I'm safe, I'm strong. Now I can actually blossom and like give my gift to the world.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, it is interesting because, you do need that safety and love to blossom. It's definitely a component, but I think that you can go through, I like to think of a lotus, like, you can still blossom in the murkiest of environments, because I have a lot of people that follow me that aren't coming from loving households, aren't coming from that space where they are being nurtured. And so I like to, really impress the fact that even within that murkiness, within that muddy water, when things aren't very nurturing, you can still, rise above and take what power you have inwardly, to still blossom out.
Mm. I'm all on board on that too. And that's where it gets really interesting, right? Is that you're able to generate any emotion you want, from the saddest to the
Yeah.
most empowering, all within yourself. Like
Mhm.
I recently was watching a Tony Robbins seminar, and he was talking about how to actually like get into your body and like jump up and down, start like, you know,
Yeah.
cheering and everything. And it actually
Mhm.
like gets you into an excited state like within your body. And, you know, he was saying to even jump up and down as if it's like a 20 out of 10, like you're that excited. And what
Yeah.
makes it interesting, and you know, and he even pointed this out, is that the more constant you do it, or the more you do it with repetition, is that it actually elevates your baseline state. That you actually elevate your state above where it used to be. And the utility in that is that now you're able to like, you know, if before you were operating at a 5 out of 10, you're now at a 10 out of 10, like more consistently.
Mhm.
And that 10 out of 10 just becomes your baseline. And then now like the next level opens up. So like as you continuously do that, like cool shit happens. And in the last week, since I've watched this seminar, I started doing that. Like
Yeah.
anytime I started feeling sluggish or slow while sitting in my chair, I would get up like right beside me and just start like chanting, like cheering, like, and just like visualizing
Nice.
all the events that I wanted to accomplish. And it's crazy how
Mhm.
quickly it changes your state. You know, you do that for 60
Oh
seconds
my god.
and you sit back down and it feels like you're in a completely different world.
Yeah. There's, 2 things I wanna say towards that. It's interesting that, you guys were doing that, because that is a form of stimming from autism, like jumping up and
Really?
down because you
No.
have so much energy. Yeah.
Are you about to
So that
diagnose me on
is
this
funny.
podcast?
Right.
Oh my
But it
gosh.
is for me, what it does is it resets my energy, to a better place, and allows me to get rid of stagnant energy.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I definitely think that spirituality mixes in to autism as well. And we are just spiritual bodies. Like the CIA has released documents that like confirms
Yes.
that we are just energetic beings. And by calibrating our energy, our frequency, our vibration to these certain states, then we can have things that vibrate similarly, even if that is just another state of emotion, you know, even if that is just moving from sad to happy. It's just a difference in energy.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets interesting too, is if you just start looking at the world in energy as opposed to like the physical matter that exists. Like I don't know. To me, that's where it gets like really wild. And even where do I want to go with this? I don't really know where I want to go with this.
It's just crazy. Like to think like everything that we're seeing around us it's just energy that's like vibrating at a very high speed, and it's just so compacted that we're seeing it physically, but also knowing that within your eyes are not seeing the full spectrum of light that we can see. So there
Yeah.
are also things around us that are there, but we are just not physically seeing them. Which is like, oh my God.
Well, yeah.
Like, what?
I think that was a big thing that broke my mind, is like realizing that, like, the only reason humans are humans is because they're vibrating at a different rate than like a rock. Like, that's what it just comes down to, is the rate of vibration. And it's
Yeah.
like, what? Like, I need a second on that one.
Yeah. The universe is just like a mad mathematician. Like different algorithms and
That's where it always gets interesting too. And luckily I finally have gotten to a point with like random people messaging me on or like leaving comments, like negative comments. But it's always fascinating when people leave negative comments of like, where's the proof? Like, what's the proof? Or like, this doesn't make sense. Like, where are you getting this from? Like, you're using taboo, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, the CIA has released documents on this stuff, like,
yes.
first of all, just look inward. Like, does it just feel like it makes sense to you? And it's so wild whenever you're able to like just peel it back and you're like, guys, come on. Like, I'm helping you. Like, this is the way.
Yeah. So I actually sympathize with those people in a strange
Good.
way, in that I am someone who is pretty analytical. I am someone who needs proof of things. And that is why I read so much as well. I'm especially with spiritual knowledge, I feel like I can never get enough. I'm always absorbing, even if it's something that I don't believe in or something that goes against what I'm currently believing, I'll still read it, just because I want the knowledge of that. And so for me, what I try and do is I try and provide the sources, like, oh no, Dolores Cannon, this research is sound because she conducted it in experimental ways. She made sure that she had, she controlled her variables within the experiment to make sure that it was valid. Um, and within the CIA, there's like documents where they're doing their own research. And also with my psychic mediumship, I would say that that's like the biggest thing that brought me over to spirituality, because I could like see it. And whenever I do a reading for someone that's skeptical, I just did a reading for my sister-in-law 3 weeks ago, and I was bringing out things that like she didn't know, and she had to call her family, and her family confirmed that those things are accurate. And she was just like, what the? And it's like, seeing is believing to them, and it's like, oh, I sympathize, like me too, and I'm going to show you so that you can see like what we're capable of. Yeah, so I am grateful that I have that, because it's also brought me over.
For sure. No, and that's
Yeah.
a really interesting point too, is whenever you kind of see something before other people, like even are aware of it or have not even told people. There was something else I was thinking about bringing up. I can't remember what it was. I know that there was one kid who I was talking to, and he was saying about how, from his, like, the way he sees, I think he's clairvoyant as well, or
Uh-huh.
clairsentience energy, being able to see
Oh,
energy. I
okay.
think it's
Yeah.
clairsentient. Yeah, he's clairsentient.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
he was saying that he could like feel or see the energy that this lady was like pregnant. And it
Whoa.
was somebody, I don't know if they were doing a reading or something, but it was like a couple that he knew, but they hadn't told anybody yet. And so he was like, oh yeah, like, I forget what he said, but he's like, you guys are having a kid, right? And they were like, what? Like, no, like, not, that's not happening. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, and he kind of started doubting himself and his abilities. And then like it came
Mhm.
up later and he was like, he's like, I knew it. He's like, I knew it.
Yeah, it's funny that you say doubting his abilities, because that's a big thing in mediumship, where even for my sister-in-law, when I was reading for her, originally I was getting a lot of stuff, and then like towards the end she was just like, I don't know, I don't know. And then and so towards the end, I was just like, maybe I'm just getting tired. Like, I'm sorry. It made me feel bad. I was like, I'm sorry. I'm like no longer connecting. Um, and then my brother called me later, like 2 days later, and was just like, yeah, she spoke to her family and like all of that stuff was right.
Oh
And
shit.
it's that it's just that trust, putting your trust in to spirit, into your connection really with spirit, and knowing that if they have something to communicate, then it will come through. And if they don't, they don't. It's no one's fault. But that comes with the I think it comes with time, and like with time you gain wisdom of being within this like spiritual field of knowing that like, things have an ebb and flow, and sometimes they come and that's cool, and sometimes they don't, and that's okay too.
Yeah. No, and I think
Yeah.
there's certainly something to say with practice, and trusting it, because I know that there was one occasion I had where I was doing an Akashic record reading for somebody, and they asked a question about like work and being stuck, and I'm sitting there like being clairaudient. I'm waiting for somebody to speak, and nobody's saying anything, and I kind of start to panic. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so then it took me a second, but then I realized his question. I was like, okay, so they're not saying anything, but I think it's because I have the answer to this. And it was actually something that I was dealing with in that current week. And so I just basically told him
Oh,
my
cool.
solution. And he's like, oh shit, like that makes so much sense. Like, thanks. Like that already helps a lot. Like I already know what I'm going to do now. Like da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get it. Like I was like, I get why
Yeah.
you guys didn't say anything.
It's funny, my shamanic healer, she was telling me that I'll go through things in my personal life, and then I'll start to notice after um I get clients that like are going through that same thing, and it's like
Yeah.
after I've dealt with it and after I know how to get through it. And I was talking to her and she's like, yep, that will happen, that happens to me all the time. And I'm
Oh,
just like, oh, it's like kind of annoying, but yeah, I can like help people.
it's awesome. It like reinforces it for you
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, definitely.
Well, and that's something that's also gets really interesting is that like once you and I remember releasing a video that said like this is how you can like read people or like read people's minds. And the core concept is this, that in order for you to tell if somebody is like lying or like in shame, trying to shame you or trying to do certain things, the core concept is that you need to rise above that frequency and you need to associate yourself with a higher level of energy. So like,
Mhm.
if someone's in like an anger or fear state, they're not able to tell if somebody's in the state of love or joy or enlightenment.
Mm,
But somebody who is in a state of love, joy, and enlightenment is able to see down and be like, oh, like I can tell you're lying about this. I can tell you're lying because you want to hide something, and all these different
mm.
things. And so, yeah, I remember realizing that and being like, holy shit, like accessing a different higher level of consciousness for myself grants me the wisdom or the not even wisdom, but the awareness of where other people are standing with their energy in regards to a certain situation.
Yeah, definitely. I it actually makes me want to ask you a question,
By all means,
if that's okay.
I'll allow it.
Do you, what are your thoughts on the spiritual community in regards to ascension versus grounding? And to give more clarity around that question, I feel like we always talk about expanding consciousness and reaching the state of ascension, but not necessarily grounding back down into the 3D, into this physical space where we chose to be. Um, and it just seems like everyone wants to leave it to constantly be in this astral space.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm just
Yeah.
interested in your thoughts.
So the first thing that came to mind was the idea of masculine versus feminine energy. So
Yeah.
for the last year of my life, I very much had the mindset of, okay, everything's going to figure itself out. I don't really need to worry about money. Money's going to fall in whenever it needs to, yada, yada, yada. A lot more in the feminine, life is what it is
Yeah.
state.
Receiving. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of started to realize like that I actually needed to embody a little bit more of the masculine to kind of do and to get things done, to like produce, to actually put together a digital course, to kind of do all these different things. And so I think that number one, there's a balance there between the physical realm and the higher realm, right? Because it's all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
the next level of it is, you know, what you're saying is like, oh, I just want to ascend. I want to ascend. And I guess a part of me thinks that there is a piece of me that is still connected to the higher dimensions or higher beings or whatever you want to call it, right? You know, we're all a fraction of source. And, you know, even in these different books is that they to say that there's like a silver cord that connects your soul
Yep.
to your physical body. So there
Mm-hmm.
is an element of me that is quote unquote ascended. Like there's an element of me that's in the fifth or sixth dimension or the seventh dimension. So whatever
Always. Yeah.
energy model you want to propose. And it's funny because at the end of my interviews, I always say like, I'll see you guys in the sixth dimension. And it's because, you know, I believe that we are all simultaneously operating on all these different levels of
Mm-hmm.
energy.
Yeah.
So back to your question of, you know, this idea of, I guess, grounding or being here, you know, it's like I came to Earth for a mission. Like, you know what I mean? Like if we want to gamify this is something I got from Nick Zai where, you know, this idea of like, you know, kind of realizing that this is all a game. And so the element of any game is to complete missions, right? And so it's like, okay, well, what was my mission to come to Earth, right? If I'm this infinite being and I chose to come here, it's like, what was the mission, right? And I believe that a part of my mission, A, is to learn as much as I can, right? And there's a whole lot of interpersonal stuff. But I believe that there's also a bigger mission, which I'm trying to pull off with this podcast, is to open people's eyes to another way of learning, another way of seeing the world, reducing fear on this physical worldly plane, right? Because it's great that you can understand that we're these infinite beings hurling throughout the universe and I just want to ascend and all this stuff. But I feel like at a level, we want to be expanding the physical awareness, the awareness of the consciousness of the physical plane. So to even take this a little bit deeper, this is something that I actually kind of put together in my the last podcast. I was talking with someone. Another reason, an ironically selfish reason that I kind of started this podcast is, you know, I believe that there are certain thresholds of consciousness that we're not able to obtain until a certain event occurs. So number one, I believe that there's a personal level of consciousness that I'm able to obtain, but then I hit a threshold until I break through or lift up some gate, or I set some boundary, or I, you know, work on some lesson, or I actually execute on a lesson. And then a new gate opens and I can now transcend. I believe that there is also a planetary consciousness that occurs where once our planetary consciousness and mind evolution occurs, we can actually unlock the next stage of evolution and achieve more things as a collective. I believe that if, you know, and what proves this, I'm curious if you've probably read these books. There's books that talk about how certain inventions are created in different areas of the globe at the same time. So without any communication whatsoever. So whether it was like the Mayan civilization or the Egyptians or in China, you know, these civilizations that are vastly far apart, yet they all created hammers at the same time, or they all created pots at the same time. So the reason I bring that up is like, okay, if I'm able to open up people's minds to this new way of thinking, then it elevates their consciousness. And by elevating their consciousness, I have now raised the threshold for planetary consciousness, which inadvertently raises my ability to get to a higher state of consciousness within this physical realm, right? Because I feel like we're trying to unlock different let's say, abilities in different realms, right? Like if you're in the astral realm, like your imagination's your thing, right? Like, so I believe that there has to be some sort of pool for us to be able to do that on this physical earthly plane where we're able to manifest more quickly, or we're able to live in a higher frequency while in dense bodies, which is, you know, in a sense unheard of, right? Like we're in very dense bodies, but if we're able to then experience the love and joy we experience as spirits on this physical world, I mean, if everybody did that, like it would be crazy. Like I don't even
Change.
it would be
Yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. I really, really like that answer. I thought of so many things like that. I feel similarly. And I do think that how you were saying that you go from threshold to threshold with your consciousness. Um, Going back to the origin story of Poder with his genius, it's like he started from a place of like having it, but then it was taken away at his birth. And so when he was a teenager, it was like he had to go out and find it. So the village told him, like, hey, it's like up this mountain in a cave. So he had to trek up this mountain to a cave, like all by himself as a teenager. And then they gave him these tools, his gift. And then he had to go and learn how to use them. And it helped the village out. He had the gift of rain. So it like watered the crops. And to me, it's like we as a society are missing that formal initiation that we used to have as more community-based cultures of people moving through an ascension, basically. And it was like these very pivotal points in your life, and you knew that you moved through, and then you felt yourself ascending up. And then that, I think, in turn trickled out to the community because they knew that people in their community were getting more wisdom to essentially become elders and then pass that wisdom down again. And yeah, nowadays we don't really have that. We don't even really have like elders nowadays. Like, we have a few, but nothing like we used to. And yeah, similarly with the earth as well, there's I don't know if you heard of the story of chaos, but basically chaos is what birthed creation. And so people nowadays are talking about that the world is like falling apart, it's falling into chaos. And it's like, oh yeah, that's like right before what happens before a rebirth. Chaos birthed darkness and light. And from that came creation. And yeah, I do think that we are ascending, even though it seems like we are in chaos right now. We, just over that is a rebirth.
I'm so on board with that because it reminds me of there's a saying that strong men create great times create weak men, weak men create bad times create strong men. So then strong men create good times. So then it's just like this never ending cycle that occurs. And the other thing is there's another lens, that story that you said the guy's name was Poder. Is it spelled Poder?
Which means,
In Spanish and in Portuguese means power.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. You know that. All right, cool.
Yeah.
That's if you look at it through the lens of like, this is how you obtain power. Like that's another level of it, right? Is that you have these initiation processes, you go through the thick of things in order to transcend up and get that goal. And that's really how you harness your own power of life. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And I think nowadays it's like younger people feel so lost because maybe they're going through that initiation and they don't know what it is. And they're just like, why does my life suck right now? Why am I going through this really difficult point? And it's like, there's no one there to tell them like, hey, you're going through this, but after is a rebirth. Your whole life is a process of death, It's funny when I do tarot reading, people are so afraid of the death card. And I tell them the death card is my favorite one because death is transformation, it's rebirth. And throughout your life, you're going through so many deaths, but then you're becoming reborn and you're breaking down your old self to create this new self, which includes the old self, but it's also something new. And it needs to occur. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much truth to that. And, I remember there's a really cool quote. I don't know who said it. I know he wrote it down at one point, so I'll say that I said it. um,
I mean, universal consciousness,
yeah,
like you did.
it was a piece of me somewhere.
Yeah.
But it was like along the lines of like, well, I know what it is. It's a moment is just a death is just another moment in consciousness. And it's crazy because I think the first time I either thought of that or heard it was regard to actually physically dying, right? If you're physically dying, it's just another moment in consciousness. Like we have this huge belief system like, oh my gosh, when we die, it's over. But it's like, it's just another moment. But then where it actually gets broken down is you can actually look at it as a moment to moment basis. Like even this moment right here, if I can allow my ego, allow my past self to die in order to be present in this moment, in this moment, in this moment, then it enables me to be that ever changing creature that's going to continuously evolve. And I believe that that's something that's super important to even have like this conversation or to have a long form interview in general.
Yeah, I like to, I don't know if this is going off on a tangent,
Do it.
but I I like to think of anxiety when I talk about the death, because it reminds me of fear. And anxiety and fear intrinsically linked. And people always say that they want to release their fear or get rid of their fear. But to me, fear is just an archetype that's internally within us. And if you've ever done something that you're like deathly afraid of, if you've ever had an interview that you're really afraid of, it feels like you're dying. Like,
Mm,
and there's plenty of people in the ER with like anxiety attacks that feel like they're dying. And it's like if you could just carry that fear with you and do it anyways, then you will die. You go through the death, but then you reappear, you reemerge, and you've created something new within you. So yeah, I definitely think that like it's not about killing these things off. It's about using them for that process
right.
of initiation.
And do you feel like there's a level of, as opposed to even carrying it with you, like allowing that to die, allowing that energy to die off, because it could be an energy that you've just attached to. And we all know how good attachment is because it
Yeah.
kept you alive. Being afraid kept you alive in the first place. And it's actually really funny. It reminds me of a story with my mom, which, God bless her. She listens to this podcast, so I know she's listening. But Rosh says hi.
Yeah.
um, what was it? We redid the front lawn and I helped her out with it. And, there was a lot as the seeds were growing, as the grass was growing, there was a lot of like worry and angst because it's our front yard, there's no grass. So she carried a lot of worry and trouble or like over it. Like every day it was like, I wonder if the grass is going to grow. I wonder if the grass is going to grow. And I'm like, yeah, it will. Like, just like relax, like let it go. We'll give it love. And, afterwards it finally grew, beautiful lawn and everything. And I said something to the effect of like, see, like there was no need to worry. And she said that she was like, she said something along the lines of like, I believe that it was my worrying that got it to grow. And so I think it's
Ah.
really interesting how we attach to these certain, like the ways we listen or view the world. And then once something actually occurs, it validates almost, that fear or
Mhm.
anxiety that we took into the situation initially.
Yeah, there's a great quote that goes, that sense of tension that you mistook for your sense of self. And I do think that some people, or I think like most people, even me, take on those anxieties as their sense of self. But it's like, I also like to reference Carl Jung because I think that the anxiety, the fear, it's of course not your full sense of self. It's not you. Um, but that darkness, that shadow that the fear lives within is a part of you. It might be an undeveloped part, But it's still a part that you carry with you and a part that you do need to dive into at certain points in your life. But that doesn't mean that it has to overtake you and become your full sense of self.
I love that, because I mean, that even kind of touches on what we were talking about earlier, that, you know, you allow it to, it's like recognizing it kind of is like that
Yeah.
chaos story, or the story with the two brothers, where it's like just recognizing that that exists gives you the empowerment to like move past it almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. What was gonna shift the topic a little bit. Uh, what was a TikTok that you made recently that you were like super proud of, or like maybe you like haven't seen anything like it before, and you were like, yes, like, and quite frankly, I've noticed that when I make these, it might not have performed well, but
Uh-huh.
do you have one that you are like, oh shit, like this is something like nobody's talking about, but we need to talk about?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Immediately what comes to my mind is my disassociation series because it did terribly.
Okay.
It's not like one of my most popular. But I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, especially in the spiritual community, and a lot of people did resonate with it. And like, what is it? How do you get over it? And it's something that I struggled with a lot, and to be able to like help people through that was really important. Um, and I think on TikTok, you only have a couple minutes. And so you really do have to put something out if you want it to be popular. You have to put something out that's going to have this catch, right? That's going to have a hook. Um, something that's exciting. But those things don't necessarily speak to the soul.
Mhm.
And so what I hope is like, I have the ones with the hook, the more exciting ones, the time travel portal ones that hook people in because this stuff is cool, you know?
Right.
But then I also have the deeper ones like my disassociation videos that speak to the soul and speak to the struggles of people.
it's it's really interesting too. I've been noticing that like the ones, especially myself, the ones that I believe have the most information, or I put the most effort into, they end up not doing as well, which I find super fascinating.
Same.
Yeah, it's so, and I've actually seen it with other really well-known content creators, or even like famous celebrities, or like famous celebrities, famous like entrepreneurs, where they're like, oh yeah, by the way, like you should go check out like my worst performing ones, because I feel like those have the most value in them. And it wasn't until I
Yeah.
heard one of them say that where I'm like, that is so bizarre that the ones with the
Mm-hmm.
most information end up doing the worst from like a view perspective or a like perspective.
Yeah, I was just talking to my boyfriend about this actually a couple days ago. I
Really?
was just like, it's so crazy. Yeah. I was just like, ones that I'm like, they took me a couple seconds to make. I'm just like, oh, I'm just gonna throw something up there, um, make the algorithm happy, you know?
Yeah.
Like those are the ones that like take off. And it's like, oh my God. And then ones where I'm like actually putting some like deep knowledge, deeper research into it, those are the ones that like you don't get that many people.
That's such a strange phenomenon.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the fast food culture, right?
Mm,
Like you want something that's easily packaged, that's easily consumable,
yeah.
but things that hold a lot more knowledge aren't that way because they aren't meant to be that way. It's supposed to be something that you can dive into. But TikTok is not the medium for that.
Yeah.
So what I've done is like the things that I want to talk about that mean more to me go on my YouTube channel,
Hmm.
which isn't as popular, but yeah.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, and it still gets to people and yeah.
Well, so then what, getting back to getting back to the initial reason I asked the question, was, so what is a disassociation, or like what did you say, disassociation disorder?
Yeah, it's just where you feel not a part of your body. So to me, I didn't know what it was, and I would go to doctors and be like, "What is this?" And they would try and give me like a medical diagnosis for it, which just made me feel crazy, like, honestly.
Of course.
Um, but really, when you think about it, it's just like the soul realizing it's not contained in this vessel and it
Mm.
can move everywhere. And sometimes you feel like your soul is over there and not here. And that's okay. And I never had someone to tell me that before I started looking into spirituality and getting my deep trance hypnotherapist and my shamanic healer. I never had someone to tell me it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. This is something normal that can happen. Um, and yeah, I feel like a lot of people think that they're crazy, and they feel like they can't get out of that space when they're in it. And it can feel very scary
Yeah.
if like you feel like you're floating over there but you're here. And like I said, I experience it when I'm on Zoom. And I actually have like post-it notes right now
Yeah,
like
you were
over
saying
my
that.
face. Yeah, because sometimes I feel like my soul is over there, but then I'm looking at myself and I'm just like, oh God, where am I? And I get kind of like disoriented. Um, but it's okay, like, because your soul is everywhere. Like, it can bounce that way. Um, and even though from like a human perspective, sometimes it scares me. And so I do put post-it notes up to like prevent that. It's okay to be scared too. Like, it's okay to have that emotion. And I think more people just need to know that like the things that they're experiencing are okay. It doesn't mean that they are crazy or abnormal or wrong or bad or not healed or whatever it is, it's okay.
Yeah, it's almost a part of the journey. So then what?
Yeah.
So then what? So then what do? Let me rephrase that. What does the literature or like the book say about this dissociation order from like a
Mm.
spiritual context? Just that like the soul bounces around.
Yeah, so I actually haven't found that much on in books about it. So
Okay.
that's why it was so important for me to talk on.
Mm.
I learned what I learned through my shamanic healer, through my deep trance hypnotherapist, and also going through it myself. Um, and yeah, just like figuring out how I navigate it. Um, Figuring out my triggers for it, because I do think it gets worse when you have anxiety. So it's like figuring out like why it gets worse. I think for me, I'm really interested in like the why. So it's like, well, if it is just my soul like bouncing, why is it worse when I feel this heightened stress? Is it because like the anxiety is just producing more fear in me? So it's like making that worse. Um yeah, it's interesting when you get into it, but basically from what I found is it is just the soul knowing that it's just part of a vessel. It's not contained to this body. You do have that spiritual cord, but even from that spiritual cord, astral projection, you can project yourself energetically to other places. Um and that's completely normal. And if it's going to happen when you're in an anxious state, then that might make you feel more anxious because it's like, oh my God, I'm not in my body right now. With anxiety, you need to be in your body to feel more grounded. You don't need to be in that state that is projecting yourself. You need to be in that state that's more grounded. So it's probably a calling back of like, oh my God, I need to like recenter myself. Your
Right.
soul knowing that that needs to happen.
So does it feel like you're just kind of floating outside of it? Like, does it feel like you're kind of like
Mm-hmm.
away from you?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's something that I've kind of tried to do intentionally with what is it? Like with that the astral realm stuff that I was telling you about at the beginning of this, where
Mm-hmm.
like I would try to actually, like, once I would project myself into the realm, I would kind of open up a portal back in so I could see myself while meditating. And by
Yeah.
seeing myself, I would then be able to like, what was it? Kind of like clear energy from my body. Like if something was sore, I could use like my astral to kind of like pick it up, to move it around, or stuff like that, to actually like rework back into my body. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
that makes sense or not.
No, it totally makes sense. And yeah, I think that disassociation is a great tool to use. And it's something, like I said, we use it in astral projection. You can use it in energy work as well. But I think that people freak out about it when it happens randomly, spontaneously, when they're not expecting it. And then it's like that calming down of like, no, it's okay. This is normal.
Well, I mean,
It's all
like,
right.
and even more so, right? If you look at it from the perspective of like the medical industry now, it's like someone comes to you and it's like, hey, I feel like I'm floating out of my body. You know, their first response would be, oh, I've got a pill that can fix that.
Yes. Oh my God. I yeah, I dealt with severe anxiety for about 2 years. I couldn't even leave my house. I had agoraphobia. I was having panic attacks, like,
Sorry, what phobia?
I don't know, like agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia.
It's a fear of leaving your house.
Oh,
Like, I would go to Target and literally I would sit in the Target parking lot, like ramping myself up. And the Target was like 2 minutes from my house. And I would sit in the parking lot, like ramping myself up, like, you can do this, you can go into the store. But I couldn't. For 2 years, I was like that. And like multiple panic attacks a day. And I was in and out of doctor's offices trying to get some help for it because it was like, I could not live that way. Like I was literally just confined to my bed, and even in my bed, I was having panic attacks. And they just wanted to give me Xanax, Klonopin, and I had friends who had taken that, and they were worse off than when they started. And I was just like, oh, I don't want to be like that. So even though it's hurting me so bad, I don't want to do that. And yeah, it came to a point where like I did not want to be on this earth anymore. And I probably would not have been if it wasn't for my deep trance hypnotherapist. I found her, and after our very first session, I went into that deep trance, never had another panic attack again. And then we just started doing the work, the deep, unconscious, subconscious work. And every session, it just got better and better and better. And yes, I still have anxieties. I still have fear. Like before hopping on here, I was like a little shaky. But I know now that like it's okay. It doesn't have to go into that full blown like panic spiral.
that's so wild.
Yeah, but it's like they want to push this like McDonald's fast food pill at you. This will take care of everything. And it's like, no,
This
that's
won't.
not
This
what
will
it
cover it up.
does.
This will cover it up.
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do the work. You don't
Yeah.
have to look at it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's I'm sure you're familiar with Louise Hay.
I'm
You can
not.
heal yourself.
Louise Hay.
She talks about disease within the body being actually dis-ease within the body. And so if you can heal that dis-ease within the body, you can heal certain diseases. And basically it's like going into the subconscious and realizing that you have your body itself, it can hold on to energy. It holds on to stagnant energy. And if you don't allow that to flow out of the body somehow, it's going to stay in there. And it's just going to build up, build up, build up. And then eventually it's going to explode out of you in a panic attack or whatever it is. And also Dr. John Sarno talks about this. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he wrote the book, I believe it's called The Mind Body Prescription. But basically what he talks about is he had an office where he only dealt with people with back pain issues. And these people could not be healed by like any other doctor. So they came to him, and instead of working on their back pain by doing surgeries or giving them medication or whatever it was, he did trauma work. And through the trauma work, people who could not be healed of their back pain were coming out like completely healed.
So crazy.
And he was prolific. And it was like trauma is held within the body, and we just try and stuff it down or use these pills to, like you said, hide the symptoms, but they're going to come out in an explosive way some way. So like, yeah, it might be working for now, but if you never deal with the underlying traumas, they're always there.
Right. It never went away. You never really learned the lesson.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, that's difficult. I know, I mean, it's a real epidemic in our society, the masking of the pain that really everyone goes through. And we've created this, like, well, I guess not we per se, but there's definitely been this societal, reaction to actually like medicate it, which isn't even curing it, right? It's just a treat, not to cure kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And, I've read a book, read the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Dr.
Yes.
Van Brunsel. Is that right? Burden Van Brunsel?
Vessel?
Bessel? It's been a while.
Von Bessel.
Von Bessel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I knew there was like,
yeah,
3
same.
words.
Yeah. Yeah, great book.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing how it's like this whole construct of our life gets, repeated over and over again until we learn the lesson. And you could say that for a great myriad of things, like even starting this podcast. Like, there are things that I have learned, like from scheduling people to, setting boundaries, where like it just starts popping up. And until I actually like take action on implementing the boundaries I need to learn, I mean, and this is obviously just with a podcast, but it happens with yourself. It happens with your relationships. And it's just really crazy how like these things keep happening over and over. But then once you choose a different pattern, once you choose a different path, of course, there's a little bit to actually like, you have to stick with it a little bit. Like it might happen a couple times, but once you repeatedly choose the different process, it's like, it's crazy how your world just changes from that decision.
Yeah. It's, it kind of goes against what we as a culture have been like conditioned to do, though. So it is like very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, going against conditioning it's a hard thing. I mean, especially if you don't see your own blind spot. And that was a huge thing, like that kind of happened to me before my awakening, is like, I was in San Diego, and I think there were 6 girls. No, it could not have been 6, but at least four girls who like super good friends with, who all came up to me within like a couple week period. And they're like, hey, like they're comfortable telling me this because we're like best friends now. But beforehand, they were like, when we first met, like I hated you. And I was like, what?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Like, all right.
I was a different person then. So by the way,
okay.
Not me now. But I was like, I didn't know what to do with this, but I found it so fascinating that 4 separate girls said this or reiterated this, who were now like, yeah, I mean, like, I'm going to tell you now because we're like best friends. But at the time, it was very much like, I didn't like you. And I'm like, I don't know. To me, it just was so weird. And the reason I'm bringing that up is like, you don't know your own blind spots. Like, we don't know where our own blind spots are in our life, let alone a societal life, if no one's talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It is. I think that's why community is so important, but we've kind of gotten away from community-based systems. And it's unfortunate, but with the internet, you can. It's unfortunate, but then I see like the silver lining with the internet, right? Because then you can like branch out to all of these different people and form your communities there.
Oh, for sure.
But it's like allowing yourself to truly be that intimate and vulnerable with someone, to both tell them their blind spots, but then also receive it when they tell you. And I think that's really rare.
I mean, I'm all on board with that. And yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's, and now that I'm thinking about it, that was probably another reason I started this podcast, was to actually get associated with like-minded people in this industry, or in this, I guess not even an industry, it's a community. It's a thought process. It's a way of thinking where, I mean, look, you're in Chicago. Like, I've talked to people in Toronto, talked to people in London. I've talked to people in, LA, SoCal, Florida, Texas, like it's all over the world that this exists, but it's not like there's not really like a centralized place for it. And it's almost like these conversations aren't, I mean, this isn't something you talk about every day with like the average person either.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I try to, but then like you get like the stares, like the blank stares back, and it's like, oh god, I went too far.
I've gotten those. Yeah,
But
it's hilarious too because I've gotten that in interviews too, where I'll say something about aliens usually, and they like take like a little step back, and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, all right, that was
It's
too
like, oh
far.
god, okay.
Reel that back.
Yeah. Like, let me take that back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is nice because it is hard to find people who are like within this space, I think. Which I don't know why it's so hard though.
I don't.
Because I would like to think that like the world is raising or like ascending its consciousness and more people are becoming open. Um, but then it's like when I look around my immediate surroundings, I don't see other people that have the same thoughts, and maybe they do. They're just not like telling me that. Yeah.
You know, it's possible, and I think an element. You know, here's the thing: is actually probably from having a podcast. This is where it gets interesting. Is I've actually started being able to discern the people who are able to kind of have these conversations almost like, you know, I'm sure there's people listening now who the reason that they're listening is because we met in person and just the nature of the conversation, the way they talked about the world, I could see that they were on that path of, okay, like they're down with spirituality, or at least they're open-minded to hearing about it. And the conversation probably went along the lines of like, hey, I've got a podcast like that you should check out. And it's so cool because like I think it exists, but maybe I think there's a couple things here, right? Number one, we're not used to actually seeking it out in society. Number two, we may have this projection of society being like against it, that this is something that's taboo, that maybe we need to actually destigmatize that in the first place. And then the next level of it is that maybe there are people, I believe that there are people who don't like fully know where to go with it. Like it seems like there are people who are open to this way of thinking, who have thought these thoughts, but they've never fully articulated it because maybe they just don't want to sound crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is hard to articulate some of these things. So
Oh yeah.
I totally understand. And yeah, I do think a lot of the things that at least I talk about are like, yeah, I think within the spiritual community as a whole, like a lot of the things that we talk about are taboo. Me in particular, I talk a lot about death. That is a huge um, thing that I always weave into my videos, and a lot of my uh, followers or subscribers, they're people with a fear of death because I talk about it. And that's not something you can talk about in everyday conversation without it being like, what is this lady on about? Like, what is she talking about? It's really morbid. I don't want to talk about that. But yeah, to me, I think that those things are important. But yeah, it's hard to know when to bring those things up, especially socially. Like I said, I don't get a lot of social cues. I have to. I'm very much in my head when I interact socially, and people always say. I remember my boyfriend when I first met him. He was like, "Oh my god, you're so good with people. Like you are so good meeting people, and like how do you do it?" It's like a lot of research. Like I am so it's true. I'm like so in my head when I meet people because I'm just like, "Oh god, like you know, these like social things that I feel like come naturally to other people don't come naturally to me." And I know that that is a social construct thing. And yes, I can ascend above it. I don't have to feed into it. But if you do that, you aren't I think that you also have to understand that there is a social construct there, and that in order to live in this physical world, you do have to feed into it a bit, to be able to relate to other people. And yeah, I've taught myself how to relate to other people in that way while still keeping myself, like my true self there. And it's like this, this like back and forth thing.
No, it's really interesting because I know I've, you know, going back to whenever those girls were like, yeah, I used to hate you. It's like, all right, what am I doing wrong here? Like
Yeah.
especially if it's not even in my intention for people to hate me. Like, I don't think that's anyone's ever intention, but if that's what the world's perceiving, like, okay, I'm doing something wrong. And so even to your own point, like I did research on my own, but it's cool too, because I feel like I got to a point where I kind of just uncovered who I am and I'm just more naturally me, which enables me to be more personable and to like get to know people and like honestly truly be interested in other people. Like from a spiritual context, how we talked about earlier, like the fact that you're just another version of me and I'm just another version of you, like that just fascinates the shit out of me of like, okay, how does this person see reality? Because it's completely valid because this is just another instance or a version of me that's viewing the same landscape, but through their own eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like, I saw this really interesting TikTok that was like, this guy, he has autism, and he was saying that like when he does like small talk in the office, it's like he can't do it. It's like, but then someone that has the same interest as him, or like someone that like has the same views, it's like you can go on and on and on. And like, so yeah, so that's how I feel if I meet someone who has like spiritual interests, because then it's like, oh yeah, like I know where this is going. I like I'm interested in like what you have to say. I'm interested in learning more from you. Um, but in like a small talk sense, I do feel like it's more of a dance, a social dance that you have to do. In that social dance, I um, have to try a little harder to remember the steps, which is not always enjoyable to me. But then transcending beyond that like small talk, then I can bring in my personality and like who I truly am. But yeah, I think it's just that like getting past that.
Chalk it up for another thing that we have in common with regards to
Yeah.
possibly being autistic.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, we have to go.
Just not a bad
I'm
thing.
not.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, no.
the new wave.
That's a good point, right? I'm being a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm probably casting a little bit of negative judgment, right? Because that's what we've been taught to believe. I just think it's funny. I'm kind of just making a joke out of it because I've kind of always joked about it in the first place. And quite frankly, most of the very successful people in this world are on the spectrum. So, I think I probably also joked about it because I'm like, well, I want to be successful, so I might as well start joking about actually being autistic.
Yeah, it is interesting learning more about it, and like through that learning about myself, and like realizing though that like autism is just a label that society has put on it to like categorize what this form of thinking is. But like you said, it is or like I believe it is something that comes with a new wave. It is something that my soul wanted to come into existence with, this different type of thinking. And yeah, it's just like autism is a label to make it easier for humans to understand or to categorize, just
For
like
sure.
time doesn't exist, but it's just like a label, or we need to see time linearly so that our heads don't explode and we can make sense of this life.
Well, and we're able to interact, right? Because like without time, we would have never been able to film this, record this, right?
True.
So it has its utility.
That's true.
But I also I didn't even know that you worked death in the majority of your stuff. And I'm not sure how vernacular, verbose, what's the word here? I'm not sure how, I'm missing the word. I'm not sure how aware you are of like the Egyptian gods, but whenever I went to Egypt, the god that stuck out to me the most was Anubis, who's over my left shoulder right now. And he's actually the god of death and like mummification.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was like,
yeah, I've been trying to talk about a little bit of different topics in my videos recently, just because like I don't like to be pigeonholed. I like to cover a whole like variety of spiritual topics, and like death is just something that people really latched onto and something that I think is important. But now I'm just like, oh, but I also do other things.
yeah.
But death is really important as well. And yeah, there's actually a really great, I don't know if you're familiar with Zen Buddhism, but Zen Buddhists work in death so much so that they actually have a death meditation. And so they meditate on their death regularly. This is something that I've tried to incorporate into my life, where I just meditate on that death. Because if you free yourself from the fear of death, or the fear of death in transformation, then you can go through life in a much more flow state. And
yeah, I believe a lot of Dolores Cannon's work and Michael Noon's work has really like freed me from that fear of death. I'm just like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. Like I'm cool with it now. And yeah, so I feel like that's always something to measure your energy when exploring these new ideas, because like whatever feels more in alignment almost like feels more right, like will help you live in a more free and aligned way, in a sense.
Yeah, it's there's self-reliance, Ralph Emerson.
Okay.
Have you read it?
I'll have to check that out.
So it's not like, it's a really boring read, to be honest with you, but it's one of my favorites. It's like one of those things that you read in high school because you have to. But if you can get through it, I would really recommend it.
Okay.
Because he says that humans, we're always searching outside of ourselves for the answers. And like I am definitely a product of that, with like my search of knowledge and loving to read so much. Like I am always searching for like this greater state of knowledge. And he says that if we just quiet ourselves and go within, we have this space in the center of us, this space of creation, this space of knowing. And from that, if we create what is in that space within our knowing, and we give that to the world, then that is what the world needs. We don't need to go outside of ourselves and like see what this great person is talking, what this genius is talking about, or like follow what they're talking about. It's like, you also have that within you. They're talking about it because you have it within you. And just to know that you are also connected to that genius that you see in other people, you have it within yourself as well. And so it doesn't mean not to appreciate other people's art, or not to read their stuff, or not to enjoy it, but just to know that like you don't have to feel like, oh, I'm not as much of an expert as that person, or like I am not as much of a genius as like Tesla or Einstein. It's like, no, you have them in you. You have that same thing.
Well, that's what's...
Yeah. I feel like I went off on a deep tangent with that one. So sorry.
No, that's what we do on this podcast. You're right on par with it. Yeah. Everyone in the audience is clapping right now. That's what we do on here. Where were we with that though? Self-reliance. You were talking about
self-reliance.
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting thing. And I think that's really difficult for some people to realize, is that idea of, you know, if whatever other people have, like that's an element of you as well. And there was an episode I did with episode 31 with Simplifying Sam Chung. I'm not sure if you know who that is. She's on TikTok as well.
No.
She's like a manifestation coach. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, super cool chick. And we talked about Kanye West, and I made a clip of it and posted it on like Instagram and stuff. And, you know, the core context that we get into is like, she's like, yeah, like whenever Kanye was running around, like, I am God, she's like, I knew what he meant. Like this idea that we are the creators of our universe. And it even like kind of followed up with like, you know, if you love something in somebody else, you love that about yourself. Like that's something that is like a mutual beneficiality. Well, I posted that on Instagram. I posted it everywhere. Instagram was where it seemed to get the most backlash of people just being like,
Oh,
oh
wow.
yeah, like these people are crazy. Like I like Kanye, but this is insane. You know, I kind of stopped reading the comments at a certain point. You get to a certain point, you're like, all right, I
You
gotta
have
step
to.
away from this. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating how it's like, I don't know where I was going with that, but it reminded me of like this idea of like that interconnectivity of like that exists, but for some reason people will still fight that. It's kind of reminding me of the Matrix, how like if you expose the Matrix to itself, it'll like push back. It's almost like you have to break it in slowly without going too hard.
Yeah. I have a video where I break down the universal consciousness and how everyone is connected to source. And I like draw out this diagram, and it also explains how energy works because you tap into this source. But yeah, on Instagram as well, there's a lot of comments that are just like, it's like blasphemous, basically, like to call yourself God, to say that you are part of the source. You are not from source, that you are source. And yeah, I do think that that's like gaining traction now. I heard in it's funny that you mentioned Kanye. I was thinking of another song by I can't think of his name now. He's the rap artist that just did a song with Lil Nas.
I haven't listened to rap in a little while.
What is his name? Okay.
Kendrick?
But it's no. What's his name?
Can do a quick
I
Google
don't know.
search.
But anyway.
Little Nas?
Okay.
Little Nas new song?
Yeah. Let's see. He says I am like he just did Fabulous.
Is that the song or the artist did?
Yeah. It's this song.
The song's called Fabulous.
Uh-huh.
Fabulous.
Let's see.
I don't see any songs called Fabulous.
Crap. It does it off of
Young Boy?
No, it's from Fergie. Jack Harlow.
Okay.
And
I don't know who
he
that
does
is.
like a remix of Fergie's Fabulous.
Oh, okay.
If you've ever heard of that.
I have
but
heard
basically
that.
in the song he says like he repeats like I am like in the middle of the song, and like there's someone talking to him, and for every question that they ask him he says I am. And I was telling my friend, I was like, oh, I think that he's alluding to like this manifestation, because in the song he's talking about how like he's finally achieved everything that he's wanted to achieve, and like he bought his mom a house and all of this stuff, and like even though he doesn't have time to spend with his family, he feels like he can't stop because he's like giving them all their dreams, everything they ever wanted. But yeah, in the middle of the song he's like I am, and I was like, oh, that's like a little hint at people, like yeah, so I do feel like there's little hints here and there, but artists can't fully come out and say anything about it, or like people with influence can't fully come out and say anything about it, because then they'll be treated like Kanye. And it's like, that guy's crazy. Which I don't think he's crazy, but like that's yeah.
Well, but that's such an interesting point too, because this is something that I've started trying to view, like, I've started breaking down like other people's content because I'm really curious about how things go viral, like how people grow the certain accounts. And like, it seems like people say things in a very basic way that resonate with a lot of people. And if you're going to break down complex ideas, you have to almost leave out information that is key.
Yeah.
But it, I don't know how to really fully articulate it, but it's almost like you have to take a step back. Yeah, you almost have to take a step back and not speak of it in such a grandiose fashion. You almost have to dull it down in a sense. And I don't know. It's a really fascinating
I literally
thing.
said this to my when I was talking about why certain content doesn't get views the other day, and I was just like, yeah, you have to like basically make this is a bad choice of word, but make it more layman. I want to say dumb it down, but like not saying that the audience is dumb, but like just make it more layman, more understandable. And if you read a lot of Jung's later work, it's like so hard to understand. And like, I think a lot of his early work too, he only had a small period of time where it was like understandable because he had this stance where like he did not want to dumb it down. He wanted to say what he had to say. And he needed to say it in these terms, which for us it was like harder to understand, but that's the only way to get the full scope of it. And yeah, in my content, I have a lot of people that will say like, oh, why didn't you answer this question? Or like, you left out a big part of this. Like, why'd you leave this out? And it's like, I have to, or else like, it's not going to get the views, and I'm not going to be fulfilling my purpose of creating this content, which is like educating the most people that I can. And so it's like a double-edged sword, because you want to give them the full information, but it's like I can't for some reason. And in order to do that, I have to navigate to a different medium like a YouTube to fully give that to you.
You know, that's a really good point, that, you know, the more long form stuff would need to be on YouTube versus right, because it's almost like, you know, and I've always kind of said this, where it's like, if you could know the answers to all the universe, but if you can't say it in a way that people understand, then it's useless, right? Like if you don't know how to speak but you know all the answers, it's like it's useless. So it becomes this very interesting dance, in a sense, of how to articulate these deep ideas with very common knowledge or very common words. And quite frankly, I think that's why stories do so well, is because if you can tell a good story, then it resonates in a different way. So it's fascinating. And quite frankly, we're going down this hole. I feel like that this podcast, a part of its Achilles heel might be the fact that it's not dumbed down. But see, at the same time I say that, right? At the same time I say that, but then I see there's people like who have wildly successful podcasts, and the first two that come to mind are Dr. Jordan Peterson and Lex Friedman, who might actually also be a doctor. But they speak at a very high level, and they both have very large followings. So I don't know. The answer comes back is that they are able to articulate very complex ideas in an efficient way. So yes, kudos to them, but they're not really leaving things out. I mean, it's they're answering very difficult questions, but they're still able to pull it off. So, I mean, I guess I don't know. And maybe that's just a part of this, is figuring out the ways to say these things the right way that actually resonates with people. And then once you find that way, just keep saying it.
Yeah. And yeah, I think once you also find I think there's a difference between audience and community. I think on TikTok, I have an audience, and for an audience, they aren't going to be there necessarily because they are interested in what you have to say. they are interested in the content. Whereas on YouTube, I think I have a community that is more interested in what I actually have to say. So it doesn't matter if the content is more complex, they'll stick with it because they know at the end, like, they're going to know what I'm talking about, or I'm going to answer a question if they have it in the comment section. Yeah, I think that's where the big difference for me comes from. And it's just like growing that community to a bigger level where you can connect to more people, but then also be able to talk more in depth about these things, instead of feeling like you have to push out this like hook based content.
Right. No, that's definitely a
Yeah.
really good point, right? Is that, because if I have, I don't know what the new number's up, well over 100, probably over 180,000 followers on TikTok. It's like you said,
Yeah.
that's an audience, right? But then you get to the
Mhm.
podcast, and I mean, they range wildly, but I think the most downloads I have on a episode is like 460, I think, or something. It's like just shy of
Wow.
500. So you look at
That's
that,
crazy.
vast difference, right? And I think
Yeah.
there's also an element of like my podcasts are like a lot longer length. So it's a very specific
Mhm.
person that I'm trying to target with my podcast, which,
Yep.
is a benefit. But to your point, it's like the people listening to this are more tighter into that community of, okay, I'm down to listen to these wild, like long form kind of conversations, versus like TikTok, Instagram. That's just like raising the flag of like,
Mhm.
hey, come check this out.
Yes. Yep. Mhm. Yeah, it's that, I like to think of it as, like I said, the fast food. Like, it's like something
Mm.
quick, easy, consumable, um, tastes good,
Oh yeah.
like, they're like yeah. So, they're in it for that, like, that instant dopamine of like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Mm.
Like, I can save that, share it to a friend, like, cool. But then the people that come for the longer form content really wanna understand it and integrate it, and that takes deeper work. Um, yeah,
That's
it's
actually a
just a
really
different
fascinating
medium.
idea. Yeah, because I mean, honestly, because I've been saying for the longest time, like if I could do without TikTok or without like creating these like short form reels, like I just want to dive all
Mhm.
in on the podcast. But I feel like I see that as a
Yes.
way to get there. But it's interesting what you're
Uh-huh.
saying. But
Same.
maybe I need to invest more into actually creating like 15, 20-minute YouTube videos to teach people things. Like maybe that's honestly, that
Yeah.
might be where, fuck. Thanks. Thanks, Rosh. This might be solid. That might
Well, I
be
feel like
solid.
we're paralleled in that way
Yeah.
because I'm honestly the same, where, like, TikTok is not my favorite place to be.
It's so poisonous
I
too.
like,
The
you
comments are so
know
fucking
Yeah,
poisonous.
like, oh my god, and jeez, and people don't understand that, like, I only have a couple minutes, and they'll comment on something and say, like, "What about this? What about" like, I'm sorry, I can't explain everything within
Right.
a couple minutes, um, and yeah, like, if I did not have to do and I don't know, like, about you, but to me or for me, it takes a long time to create TikTok content. Even though they're quick videos, I am still, like, writing, refining, editing, like, for a while, these videos. Um, and yeah, if I did not have to do that, I could just do YouTube and have my, like, bulk of my community on there and really dive into these this deep content and really explain to people, um, these various spiritual topics, then I would definitely do that instead. Yeah, I also feel like on my YouTube, people get a sense more of who I am. I think on TikTok, you become
Mm,
mm, more of a caricature of who you are, and it's much easier for people to assign labels to you.
interesting.
Whereas on my YouTube, I think they get a fuller picture of, like, what I'm about, what I actually think. I think on TikTok, I get a lot of, like, people telling me, like, "Well, I don't believe this. Why are you, like, making people believe this. And I'm just like, I'm not. I'm like, I think that you should believe whatever you want to believe. Like, please don't just blindly believe what I'm saying. That would be the worst thing to me. I'm hoping that by giving you this seed of knowledge, you can go out and expand it, grow it yourself.
Right.
And on TikTok, I think that people think that just because you have, just a little bit. And so you're like telling people this thing and, and that's it.
That's a good point,
But
too.
on YouTube, it's much more of like a flowing conversation of like, oh yeah, there's this other point of view as well. And,
No, I can definitely relate to that. And it does seem like there are a lot of, and that's funny too, because that's something I just saw yesterday, was that it seems like in the TikToks where people are like, this is the way it is, like a little bit more direct, is that they actually do better.
Mhm.
Like, it's like, oh, okay, because it
Mhm.
resonates at a
Yeah.
certain point. As opposed to a lot of
Mhm.
my videos, actually more so recently, are more like, this is the way I see the world, take it or leave it. Whereas that tends to
Mhm.
like lose some of its like punch to it,
Yep.
which
Yeah.
it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. But I think you're onto something here with the idea of like, TikTok being something to move away from, at least in that sense of
Mhm.
like, because it's not, I don't know. It just doesn't.
It's very grind heavy. Like, I am not about the grind at all.
Right.
And like something about being on it is very like overstimulating and very much so like this hustle energy, I think.
Right. That's a good point. It's also
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know if you've done this before, but like when you repost certain videos on like if you kind of clip and I'm sorry guys, we'll get back to spirituality stuff in a second here. Just a small detour. I'm not sure if you it's a small detour in the creator space. I'm not I'm not sure if you noticed, but like if you make a video and then post it on like YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and on TikTok,
Oh.
they all perform vastly
Uh-huh.
different, which I find so fascinating as well.
Yes. None of my videos that have gone viral on TikTok have gotten a fraction of the views on Shorts or Instagram Reel.
It's crazy.
Like, I've posted my most popular video, I think my most popular was like 6 or 7 million. Posted it on both Instagram and YouTube Shorts. Got like 200 views on YouTube, and then Instagram, I don't know, probably like 1,000. Instagram does a little bit better than YouTube.
It's so wild. All right, so let's
Yeah.
get back to the let's get back to the spirituality stuff. If anyone braved the storm, I'm all about it. So thank you. But you were talking about trance. I believe it was like trance therapy helping you with anxiety. So I guess I'm not
Mhm.
really familiar with what trance therapy is. So like, how did that help you? Like, what is trance therapy, and like, how did that help you with your anxiety?
Yeah, so it's deep trance hypnotherapy, and basically what it is you lay down, you get into this very deep state of relaxation, and so you're guided to the state of deep relaxation through both binaural beats, and also the hypnotist's voice guides you there. And then you can access a space in the subconscious, a space that not many people know how to access naturally. And so I also am a deep trance hypnotherapist. So I find that within my clients, what they say is when they get into this space, it feels like they're in a void of nothingness, just floating, and they feel at complete peace. And that's literally what I felt like the first time. And I had been going on 2 years of just nonstop panic attack. And then to feel that state of just like release and like all is okay in the world, just within my mind was crazy to me. And so when I was in this stage, the hypnotherapist, she spoke to my subconscious and basically said a lot of things of how I'm safe now. I can leave the past behind. Um, I no longer have to hold on to these things that are creating this fear state. And yeah, just like kept going back session after session and like reprogramming my subconscious to know these things. And the subconscious is so powerful. It's like we perceive the world with only, I think it's 5% of our conscious mind, and our subconscious is 95%. And I like to, when I talk to clients about it, I like to do the visual of an iceberg. So like with the iceberg, your conscious mind is the tip of the iceberg. It's like what you can see. And then your subconscious is everything below the surface. And if you can tap into that subconscious mind and put into it what you want to see in the world, how you want yourself to be, that cannot be overridden by the fearful conscious mind. And yeah, I just found the power in that work. So through a couple of sessions with my hypnotherapist, anxiety got so much better. And then I started diving into the spirituality. And I decided about, I think it's like at the start of the pandemic. So maybe like 2 years now, or 2.5 years. I decided to get my deep trance hypnotherapy certification and basically only focus on helping others with severe anxiety. So I helped people who were in inpatient, like hospitals, with anxiety. And it's crazy the amount of progress that I saw that like they weren't able to have with like medication or medical professionals. And it's literally just tapping into your subconscious mind, something that's within you all along. And I think through this process, you also gain so much confidence within yourself and like knowing that you are a powerful being. And that also helps you because, like I said, there's a book by John Kabat-Zinn called the Life of Catastrophe, or Life's Full Catastrophe. And it basically says that life is always a catastrophe. There's always chaos. There's always things that are going to be around us. There's always going to be that darkness. But you have to know how to find your center within that. And I think with deep trance hypnosis, I was able to find my power to get through whatever was going on in my life. And yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's pretty cool. And so then you were also saying that you usually will like take people into deep trance hypnosis before doing like a past life, well, a QHHT session.
It depends. If the person has anxiety of some type, then I will. But if they don't, then I won't.
So then how does it, right? Because I guess from, let's say like from a scientific analytical brain perspective, deep trance and QHHT would be, you're still like at the theta brainwave level or even deeper, right? Or delta.
Uh-huh. You're so with deep trance, sometimes they go into delta.
Okay.
Because I don't need them to be in theta.
Okay, so it's either delta.
Or sorry, with the anxiety. Sorry.
Okay.
With working with anxiety, sometimes they go down into delta because I don't need them to be conscious. But with past life regression, they have to stay in theta because I need them to be conscious.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay, so then that's interesting. So, but then how does it become different? How does trance become different than QHHT if they're still at the same, let's say, brainwave state?
Yeah, so they're actually both trances. And I should say deep trance is a methodology. And so I use deep trance to bring people down into the theta state so that we can do a past life regression. So deep trance is present in both.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe I could be more clear. So with deep trance hypnosis, I can help with anxiety, which is what my focus is, but I can also do like, I don't know, like insomnia or like any other myriad of issue. It's really just a methodology to bring you down into the theta or delta brainwave state so I can access the subconscious mind.
Gotcha. And then that's where you can kind of
Yeah,
like
and
do
it's
more work.
different. Yeah, and it's different than hypnosis as most people practice it. I like to clarify that this is deep trance because hypnosis, as most people know it, it lasts for, I don't know, anywhere between like 20 to 30-ish minutes. And you're in a very light state of trance, almost in the alpha state when the person is talking to you. In the deep trance state, I bring them down into trance both with a yoga position that elicits the relaxation response and then also with like deep trance speaking methods. And they're basically like, they are not speaking and they can fall asleep if they want to, if it's not past life regression, which is not similar to like a normal state of hypnosis. I feel like I'm getting confusing, but
I think we're on the same page here. But so
okay.
then with, I guess with QHHT, it's like once they're in theta, you kind of guide them versus if you're in deep trance, it's more just
Yes.
relax.
Yeah, just relax. If you fall asleep, if you enter delta, it's fine. I can still speak to your subconscious mind. But with past life regression, you want to keep them in theta because, of course, they want the recording of what they're saying.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then if you're in deep trance, that's more of you then going in to reprogram stuff. Like, would there be, so like say I have, let's say someone has a money issue, they come to you, they say deep trance, then are you kind of just repeating affirmations once they're in a theta state?
Basically, yeah. Yeah. It's it's using that deep trance to bring them down into that state. And then what I do, how it also differs a bit, I practice Milton Erickson's version of hypnosis. And so it's not a direct version. And so I'll lead them into a story, which is so interesting. I never thought about this, but I'll basically tell them a story. So one of the stories I tell is Alice in Wonderland. And it's edited to include some subconscious, indirect suggestions. But basically, that metaphor is meant to talk about change and how change is always happening. And we ride the waves of change, getting into flow state. But it's just a story. And then later on, if I think that they need a bit more direct hypnosis, then I'll move into the affirmations of like, you are accepting change, you are blah, blah, blah. But like, sometimes all they need is the metaphor. It really depends.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the subconscious speaks in dream language, and dream language is metaphors. So it takes it either way.
Honestly, I mean, coming off of the last interview we just had, that's that's pretty cool to hear you say that it speaks in metaphors. The dream language speaks in metaphors because it seems like, I mean, it comes back to our whole story thing, is that if you're being like, that's almost why these stories have been like, whether you're looking at sacred texts or, I mean, even what makes Harry Potter so amazing is that there's elements of sacred text within Harry Potter and, or even Lion King. That's a big example as well. And so like these stories are easy to grasp. Holy shit. And there's also a correlation here with what we were talking about with regards to going viral, because you need to be able to distill these down into what's consumable for people to understand.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. It's the more I like do the spiritual work, the more I'm just like, oh, like everything that I was doing with the stories, with writing, with reading, it's like it's all so connected.
It's just all coming back into it.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. All right. Well, I feel like it's a good spot to just wrap it up. I
Yeah.
believe I have your links. If not, you can feel free to send me them afterwards. But at this point, I love giving the floor to, my guests. So say whatever you want to the audience. You want to plug something, you would encourage some people to do something. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I would just encourage you to keep learning.
Read,
Always,
read more.
yeah, always keep expanding your mind, and uh, whatever comes from within is the most true, which is what we were saying throughout this whole podcast. You know at the end of the day what's the most true to you, and just keep following that. Keep an open mind, be kind to people. If you want to follow me, you can check out my links down below. I also have a anxiety course where I do deep trance hypnosis to help you with anxiety. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on the
And
podcast.
thank you for coming on. It was a great conversation. And I know that
Yeah.
I'm for sure going to need to get in touch with you about the QHHT, because it's certainly something that has
Yeah,
been pulling at
definitely.
me to try out.
Yeah, let me know.
Old,
Be fun.
you'll know. Yeah, I'll make sure you're well aware. I've got a busy couple of weeks coming up, but we'll find a calendar date for it.
Yes, definitely.
All right, awesome. Well, Rosh, thank you so much for being here on behalf of all the Conscious Monkeys. I know that they're all pleased with the conversation we just had, because big fan of the tangents, love them, keep them coming.
Yeah.
I know we'll have to have you back on the future for just more of this,
Yes.
wisdom. So guys, go check out her stuff. Super dope conversation. If you're looking for a QHHT person or no, not trance,
Deep trance
deep trance
hypnosis.
hypnosis. I can't speak.
Or more talks about death
Yeah.
and connecting to the afterlife.
I mean, there's a reason that Anubis, the god of death, resonated with me so much. And so if
It's true.
this podcast resonates with other people, then there has to be some correlation of it
Yeah.
resonating with you as well.
Yeah.
But guys, if that for some reason didn't resonate with you, I know that we will all be resonating together in the 6th dimension.